Hi, thanks for clicking play. This is Cerebral Threads, and we are back with another debate. Number three, we're doing universal basic income, and I have two guests today. I have my brother Paul, my mainstay, and Jabari Groves has come to join us today. Thanks, Jabari. We're real happy to have an extra guest. He's a first. This is awesome.
Thanks for
Um,
having me.
Not at all. Not at all. Really appreciate it. Um, we're going to let Paul get things started with a definition and his thoughts on it. Jabari and Paul are for. I'm against. And let's get right into this. Paulie, you're up.
All right, so universal basic income. One of the big pushers of this is Andrew Yang, so mostly we'll go off of what his thoughts were on it. I definitely think with a concept like this, there's going to be a lot of tweaks, a lot of changes, but for, the major concept, I think what he's saying is probably solid. Basically, he wants a universal income that's unconditional. It's not means tested. It goes to every individual. It's a regular payment, and it's cash. Those are some of the basic elements of all universal basic income. Andrew Yang in general says 18 years and up. Things that I think you should consider though, as we consider it, 16 and up, different ages and up, and maybe cutting it off at 64. Personally, I think the bigger expansion, the better, but we can go into that later. So the basic concept is every single American, 18 and up or 16 and up, gets $1,000 a month, no means test, no requirements. You're not expected to do specific things with it. Well, yeah, that's the basic concept. I would assume we're pretty much on the same page as that. We're all talking about the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it works, that definition works for the purposes of our discussion. What research I was able to do, like prior to this conversation, I saw that that's one of the things people can agree on is what is UBI once you step outside of like Yang's definition. Some people think it supplements existing programs. Others think of it in the terms of how you just outlined it, which is what makes sense for, I think, what we're talking about today.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I don't agree with UBI, but that is the definition and what people are proposing that they want, or something very close to that, maybe a little different amount or something. But yeah, I agree. That is the definition of UBI.
And also, if I bring up examples and I think there's a significant tweak to what Andrew Yang says, then I'll mention that too, because I think that's important. One of the things I'll bring up is that Iran is doing something similar to it right now. But I think it's also mentioned it's an oil economy. So yeah, it's really hard to take that one huge natural product and divide it among everybody. Like, there's a lot more pressure to share that oil money than would America or United States when we have private companies doing a lot of things. It's also got, not a sheik, but a religious leader that can influence it, plus, blah, blah, blah. So if I use an example, I'll bring up some of the things that could make this not a great example. So I think it's fair to come out with like, hey, these are the tweaks to it, so it's not a 100% great example.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Saudi Arabia, too, would be doing something similar from what I understand. Those guys clean up.
All right, so I think the first thing to do would be to dive into the economics of it, of how much it will cost. I don't think it is actually the most important thing about this. As I go on different discussions, I'm going to tell you what I think is more important about the big picture than just the finances of it. But I think it's important that we attack the finances because it's the first question I think people will have. Basically, what Andrew Yang believes, and looking at his numbers, they look solid to me. I'm definitely up for discussion. He says around per year to do what he's saying would cost 2.8 trillion at the top. To actually send those out, you're sending out checks of 2.8 trillion a year. Now, a lot of these things do, you know, the old concept, as you throw money out, people spend it, you collect it back in taxes, you try to get as much of that money back. Also, his plan says there's a lot of services removed. So the SNAPS program altogether is removed. Only are you not doing the SNAPS program, you're also removing all the infrastructure that created it. So I think there is a side note to there is many ways this would be less government. Totally understand the other side too. I think it's fair to say this could be more government if you view it a certain way. But I don't think we should discount something important as we took a whole bureaucracy, crumbled it up, tossed it, got it out of the way. And as Andrew Young says, a lot of these smaller programs that are only 100, 200, we have a lot of them, gone. Also, this is an opt-in program. Anyone can do it. If you don't want to opt in, cool. But if you have other benefits that are so important, you want to opt in, well, all right, according to Andrew Yang. Now, I don't know those details. I think are definitely worth arguing about. And if someone comes up with a slight change, I'm not going to lose my shit about it. It's not the hill I'm going to stand on, but I think it's important. So 2.8 trillion, he says, are checks leaving the door. That sounds very reasonable to any number I've checked.
Right.
These costs, he says, by the time you've removed these programs and you've saved a lot of money in certain areas, it will cost around 380 billion straight to the debt.
It would add 380, you said?
Yes, that even though we're sending out 2.8 trillion, the 8 to 9% growth GDP, or it wouldn't be grow by 8.9%.
Right.
It would go from what we averaged recently between 2.5% and 4% to 8%. With that and the savings for the programs you're going to cut out, and some savings in other individual things, he says it's around 380 billion. That's a tough one. That's so theoretical. I think a lot of his stuff makes perfect sense. And I definitely think we could track down and make sure, like, yes, this is definitely going to save, and this is going to save. But that 380 billion, I think we should be very flexible on that. I think we should, if we're going to argue this, argue that it could be a lot more. It definitely could be. I think that'd be dishonest not to bring that in. If the price is the thing for you, if the price tag is what's up, I think we should discuss it. Personally, I don't think it's that big of a deal, but hey.
Can I float a question? As you say that, I think to myself, is that cost, you guys still see me? Something just, Zoom is like prompting me here. Oh, never mind, they're trying to sell me something. Is that cost static? Because when I think about something like UBI and what it allows individuals to do in terms of their contribution economically, you know, if you're not worried about putting a roof overhead and working a job that, you know, and spending time on things you don't really care about because you needed to do it out of necessity previously, but now you have time to get an engineering degree or get that MBA or start a new business. And so that won't happen immediately, right? Like, you know, it'll take time for people to take that investment, do something with it, and then come back to eventually the market to make whatever their contribution might be. So in other words, you know, over time, I'm just theoretically here, right? That investment in terms of what we're contributing to the economy would increase, reducing hopefully then the overall cost of the program, whatever that projection is. But I mean, how do you project something like that, right? Like you don't know, you can't envision, like you don't know if I'm gonna go get an engineering degree or if I'm gonna go sail around the world.
Is that what you meant by the GDP growth, Paul? What he's saying? that's the same area he's talking about? The extra production? Right?
He
was asking where to did you hear what he said? You know, I thought that was
it sounds like what he's asking is how do you amortize that over 10 years or 20 years, and I don't see anything in his numbers addressing that to help lower that number.
Okay.
The GDP he talks about increasing is just we bought more shit and therefore more tax revenue back to the government to pay for that 2.7 trillion push.
projection, right? Like I can't imagine like how would you even begin to try to measure that, you know? It's unfortunate because if we could, you know, both sides would have a much solid argument counter for or against, because it gets really
whose side are you arguing? I like this. You go ahead.
Well, but it can go both ways though, right, Keith? Like I could argue that, you know, when you look at the pilots they've run on this, 1% of the people stopped working, and that was mostly to take care of their kids. Everybody else
the pilots, right?
In addition to receiving that money, because being the capitalist we can be as a country, we like more money, as opposed to, since you're giving me this check, I'll quit making more money and just live off of what you're giving me, which again, theoretically only meets the basic needs, right? Like housing, you know, so that could be a pretty boring existence, as opposed to I keep my job and I cash in on this extra, you know, investment that the government's making in me. Now I can really kill it and do some things business-wise, or who knows.
Those are all the
arguments. That won't happen, right? And the cost that they're throwing out there is going to be the real cost, right? I mean,
yeah. I think that goes back to definitely, yes, there's a lot of flexibility in his. It's going to cost $380 billion to the debt, because many other things are hard to analyze.
Can I just jump in there?
Sure.
My understanding of Andrew Yang's position in the numbers was that it was the 2.8 trillion, but eliminating the 126 welfare programs that we currently have would be a savings of 1.5 trillion. And these are rough numbers he was giving. And then the leftover would be covered with a VAT tax, as well as removing income tax and just going straight to a VAT tax instead. And that's how he would cover it completely, not that there would be 380 billion left over. That was my impression of what he's been arguing, and I've listened to him talk a few times and took some notes on that. So I think your numbers are basically right, but I didn't think there was 350 billion left over. I thought he wanted a VAT tax to replace the income tax as well to cover that, so that it was actually, as Jabari was saying, not only are we getting the extra production, not only are we getting people getting off this hamster wheel they're on and having the little extra money to either be an entrepreneur or pursue getting to stay home with their kids, so on and so forth, and that it would be pretty much paid for, and there wouldn't be extra taxes other than the VAT tax.
From what I had read in his thing, yeah, you're right on target, but the 380 is that VAT tax. That the programs, you're right on, 1.5 million. The 800 billion is from increased productivity, the GPD,
GDP,
gross national, blah, 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 blah.
Gross domestic product.
Increasing was going to create another tax revenue back into the system of 800 billion. What would be left was around 3.80 billion. And yes, he was, if we need to, raise taxes. The VAT tax, he particularly liked because he felt automation.
I didn't think he thought he was. I didn't think he thought he was raising taxes. That was my point. I thought what he was saying, it was even kind of neutral because of the VAT tax. I didn't know that he was saying. Okay, right. So I didn't think there was going to be more taxes, raising taxes. But if he said that elsewhere, I totally believe he would raise taxes. I'm not saying.
I'm not saying Andrew Yang said raise taxes. I'm saying without a tax raise, 380 billion is done. Right. And yes, his point was to settle it with a VAT tax. So if they're not considering that a tax, yeah, he's saying there's going to be no taxes.
Yeah.
I think saying a VAT tax is a tax, so I'd rather leave it at 380 billion short, because I think there's all kinds of ways to raise that 380 billion.
I got you. That was your addition, not right. That was one of those personal tweaks, as opposed to what Andrew Yang was putting forward. I get you.
Whatever. Yeah.
Well, I guess what I'm struggling with a little bit on the cost and trying to use hard numbers is that notion that, you know, right now we're estimating that based on, you know, what, right? And you're breaking down the anatomy of it, but what we're kind of acknowledging is there's really no good way to measure the return that we're going to get on that, but we know we're going to get one. We just don't know how large or small necessarily it might be. So it's kind of like, you know, when every time you do anything big, like
just in general, I don't agree with that, by the way. I'm just fleshing out with you what you're saying. I don't agree that there would be benefits in the future in production and the things you're saying. By the way, just to be clear.
Well, then let me rephrase it so I'm being fair, though. So that whatever the outcome is, it's either going to be a positive, a net gain, or a net loss, as far as what Keith is concerned. And right now, to try to estimate that, it's next to impossible, right? Because you're basing it on what people are going to do with that investment, what their ambitions are.
Besides the exact number, I mean, you can make some assumptions about what's going to happen from creating another $500 million, 1 trillion, 2 trillion, whatever ends up having to be created to fulfill that as far as money creation. That itself will be a problem, is what I meant. Sorry, I tangent into myself.
Though we can't come up with an exact number, I think what we can do is predict some of the things it would affect, and talk about how big of a part of our economy is that thing. How big of a part of economy is the prison system? How large a part of the economy is our military complex? How large a part of our economy is our education? How big does malnutrition affect our economy? Healthcare, homelessness, family units, education. We could definitely look at some of these things, look how large the problem is, and predict, could this help that problem? And I think in almost everything, I think prison recidivity, whatever, you go right back to prison. Right now, we have like an 86%. A big part of that is it's hard to get a job out of prison. $1,000 would keep you surviving at least until you do get a job. With a felony, it may be a long time before you get a job, especially a job to succeed in life, to pay your rent, to pay all these things. So there's all kinds of, I think, individual things we can discuss, and I got a bunch of them.
Well, I'm right there with you.
Talk about and say it has some great effect. I mean, 600,000 prisoners per year go in at 30,000 a year. That's a number we can look at and say, hey, this could be some savings. And I definitely think it would be.
I completely agree with you. That's kind of where I was going with my thinking, is that whether you're for or against a policy that's got a big price tag next to it, we've seen over history, you can come up with a projection that will say the sky is falling or the goal, you know? So instead of getting hung up on that per se and condemning something because we hear this number is going to add 330 to debt, well, maybe the first year. What about the second year? What about year 10? Like, we don't know that. So to your point, not that you throw all that out the window, but take it all with a grain of salt, and then still talk conceptually about where we are spending money and how that might be impacted by doing something like this, like you just laid out. You know? Hey,
why couldn't you just eliminate $12,000 a year in taxes on most people? Wouldn't that be easier than giving people $12,000? Couldn't you just cut $12,000 worth of taxes, licensing, fees? Why not just not take away $12,000, and then the group that needs help will probably be a lot smaller, and then people, instead of taking handouts, are just not having their money taken from them. Does that make sense? Why wouldn't we do that? It seems like it would not only solve the problem for most people, but then we would know who really needs the more specific help through government programs, charity, whatever. Do you see how like just taking the money and then sending it through the sieve of the government so that they can take their share?
Right.
Doesn't make sense, I think, just on the straight tax fact. why not just give us back
Right.
12,000, then take it from us,
Give me my
and
damn
then
money.
resort it back to us after taking
Right.
their share? Because
Yeah.
I just think they're grifters in this and just want to take a share.
So I'll say this, because I like the way you're laying that out too, because I engage in the same kind of thinking that I think other people are limited in sometimes, which is that we're just talking about a distribution of money in the economy, how it's routed, where it sits, and you can layer into that, who has a right to it and this and that. But whether it's a tax incentive, whether it's housing that's subsidized, whether it's education, to me, at the end of the day, you're still talking about dollars people are either receiving or not having to come up with, and kind of playing a shell game a little bit with it. So I'm not against saying
money is fungible. Money
Right.
is fungible is the point of that. Doesn't matter what you designate it for. If
And
it's in your bank
to...
account, it goes for whatever I want it to.
Yep. Well, I was trying to think of the challenges around why can't we do that, right? Like what problem would there be? First thing that comes to mind though is that your average American is paying, what is it, according to a recent survey, $10 a year in federal and state. So you're spending the average American's paying $10,489 a year in federal taxes, federal local income taxes. And then you've got sales tax on top of that you could eliminate, probably, right?
State tax, sales tax. How about the 20% on my airline ticket, the 20% on everything I do? I mean, there are thousands and thousands of dollars that are taken from us in all kinds of different ways that if they just gave it back, I think it would have the same effect for most people. I mean,
Sure.
don't get me wrong.
I wouldn't say for most people. Very few people. Very few people. That would be really good. That would be very few people. That would be very good. If that was a good answer, we wouldn't be here.
Right.
We've been cutting taxes since the 50s, and it hasn't worked. How many times do we have to try the exact same thing and it failed?
So you don't think most people pay more than $12,000 in taxes a year? Because I'm not talking about corporations. We're talking about people. And if Andrew Yang's plan is willing to unconditionally give it to everyone, why can't I say unconditionally stop taxing everyone so much?
What if you didn't make 12 grand?
What do you mean?
I'm not trying to solve.
Right. Wouldn't that be the
people
small
who just
amount?
don't want to.
Wouldn't
I'm
that
not
be
trying to solve people who just don't want to pay taxes, and I'm not trying to appeal to that.
Right. So wouldn't that be a small
All
group?
government
Is my
need
point.
taxes, and to even bring out just less tax is asinine. I think it's silly. But we can walk that path. But
that is one of your favorite arguments.
The taxes have always been, always will be. This is ridiculous.
I was looking up silly recently in my argument chart, and I couldn't find it. Just to let you know, asinine, silly, ridiculous. I can't find those anywhere.
You can tell who the brothers are on the show right now.
Yeah, I want 12 grand to really bad neighborhoods a year. I want 12 grand. I want to take a small city like Farmer City. The average person makes 25 grand.
Right.
Giving them 12 grand doubles their income, doubles their average income. No tax break of 12 grand is going to do remotely close because they're not making remotely close to 12 grand in taxes. The average person and the average pay is way lower than that. No, the average person in Mansfield, Illinois, 1,900 people are there. Their average pay is 25 grand. What would 12 grand in tax breaks do for them?
Is that gross? You're saying they make 25,000 gross average,
Well,
right?
What
would 12 grand less do for them?
They don't give 12 grand in
37.
taxes if you only make 25,000. You pay
Right.
very little in taxes.
Sure,
actually.
but what about
So
all the other
that
taxes?
12 grand
I made a
is gonna do
specific
amazing for
point.
them.
All right, not just income tax. That's the number you're talking. But how many taxes do they pay in sales tax, licensing fees? I mean, there is so much stuff you pay taxes on. If you could eliminate $12,000 for most people, unless you can prove that this Farmer City you're giving it as an example is representative of the majority of the people,
well,
I don't think you can.
What's the median
It's a
income in
smaller
America?
group.
What's the medium income in America?
The medium, I think it's now around, just dipped below 50,
So-
60,000 recently.
Well, so as I'm looking up,
Well, let me just bring up one other thing too. You
Yeah.
know that right now the 126 programs that a lot of people make more than that. I mean, I don't think people are going to choose to just take 12,000 and give up 20, 30, $40,000 of in-kind benefits. So I don't think you're going to eliminate those programs either if you leave that out to say people get to opt in to take it.
yeah.
So I mean, even the poorest of the poor, I don't see taking your deal of just taking 12,000 of my own directed money as opposed to getting the tens of thousands more I get in kind if I keep the 126 programs. So I get what you're saying, but I think there's more there in taxes being taken out of everyone, and I think that would cover a much wider group, and then you could pinpoint the things you were talking about to smaller groups, I think, that need it more, and then you don't have to give $1,000 a month to Bill Gates.
But I don't know. It's fun. I'm sitting here, surprisingly, I'm agreeing with, I think, part of what both of you were saying. Honestly, because I get what you're saying, Keith, in terms of taxes. To me, dollars are dollars. I don't care if it's coming in the form of a tax or you're paying it to me in a check, as long as my group is getting it. But Paul, to your point, is I'm looking right now, 65% of Americans don't pay federal tax because of how little they make. So to your point, though, Keith, that means we need to be surgical and not a shotgun approach, you know, if that's the route we're going. And we don't want to, like you said, give $1,000 to Bill Gates versus, you know, trying to give taxes back to 65% of the country who doesn't at least pay a federal tax. There's probably some in addition to that on top of it at all.
I really like the idea of that 65% of America that's not paying federal taxes are getting $1,000 to pay state taxes. You're transferring your federal money to the state. These taxes are needed for schools and roads and all these things. Taxation has a purpose and an importance. If you want to discuss less taxes, I totally understand. Tax rates should be discussed and effective tax rates should be found. But taking federal money and filtering it through your state is extremely important. It's extremely important that you take $1,000 out of the Fed and you come to the state. You know, well, I think everybody here agrees there's two different monetary policies. There's a state monetary policy where you only have so much money, you better make the best of it. You can borrow, but it's not as easy. And a federal policy where our modern monetary policy just isn't the same. We've expanded massive
I don't agree.
monies to banks. We've expanded
Just
money
a
to all
note,
kinds
I
of
don't
stuff.
agree. You said I'm sure we all agree. Go ahead, keep going, but just a note. No,
What don't
I
you
don't agree.
with? I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. No, I'm here. What don't you agree with?
What is Keith now? Keith, what don't you agree on?
Both states and the federal government now run on a federal fractional reserve banking, and they're doing fractional reserve banking and everything from their pension plans to I mean, everything is now barely covered because of fractional reserve banking. And so I think now it is not supposed to be the same, but there is almost no difference between the federal and state government. And now the fact that states
can't
are
print their
even
own money,
starting
though.
to borrow starting to lend money out in bonds and stuff for a while, they're becoming more and more little federal reserves every day.
Well, maybe I'm missing something here. Let me, I guess, throw this out here. You guys can give me thoughts on it. Because one of my kind of, I guess, patterns in thought around budget, dollars, our government, where we're at economically, and kind of how our government runs with lobby and politicians that are under the pressures of that lobby. I feel like we've reached a point, increasingly so, over the years where the Fortune 500 and their powerful lobbying arms of various industries are the ones that really run and decide what policy is. I mean, sometimes they write the laws, which kind of blows me away when I heard that. Like, you let the lobbyists write the stimulus? You gotta be kidding me. What, politicians aren't doing that? Like, no, they're completely puppets. They're not even writing the laws anymore.
Well, would you really want the people you see representing you in Congress actually physically writing the laws? I mean, I don't agree with corporations
Yeah,
writing them either,
right. I
but it
agree.
is not the sharp people up there representing us. I
I,
don't want them to have
I agree.
quill to paper.
I would
Those
hope
are
to
not
have
Ben
somebody,
Franklin's.
I would
Sorry, go
hope
ahead.
somebody on the staff or on the team or on the committee could sit down and help, craft something.
Right.
Because you and I are in agreement, though, that when the lobbyists do it, so we didn't want oversight over the slash stimulus that went out,
Absolutely.
which is crazy. So I guess sometimes I feel like we get played regardless of our ideologies, is that the
Crony
Fortune 500
capitalism,
has
right?
broken what's that?
Crony capitalism is
Yeah.
what I consider it.
500 has broken records in profit margins for decades now. Wages have remained stagnant for the most part for over 30 years under both parties. And they're sitting on a shit ton of money and the rest of us fight over these crumbs off the table like we're broke. And I look at the Bush tax cuts, that ran, I forget where they started, but till 2010. And I remember when those went in place, and, I suckle from the tip of the Fortune 500. I'm trying to get back in now. And I remember at the time thinking, my company doesn't need additional tax cuts. And I remember I get the thinking that, well, the more profitable they are, the more people they'll hire, the more they'll raise wages. Well, that used to be true. But because of technology, automation, the shift in our economy, and, public
Theoretically.
Greed, theoretically.
Theoretically, that is how it's supposed to go.
And so they take those dollars and they just go to the bottom line profit margin.
You know what I do like about UBI on that note?
Yeah.
The only thing I like about UBI or a negative income tax or any of the other different versions of this is at least it gives the money to the people first,
right,
so that it's the up the line bankers and higher production sets that have to pay for the inflation.
Yes.
But inflation is bad and should not be done. So it's kind of a half compliment because it's a bad idea because of the inflation. But at least we get it first this time is the only nice thing I can say about it.
Well, Keith, let me ask you this then, because one of the things I saw, and I'll admit, I'm not as studied on this as I am some other topics, so I can get snowed, and people try to snow on topics all the time, and usually I can call bullshit. On this one, I can't because I haven't studied enough. Right. One of the things I saw in the research I was doing is argument they made is that because this isn't creating new money, and this is shifting money, there wouldn't necessarily be inflation as would be the case when you're just printing new money, per se. And I think the argument was, well, we'll wipe out this program and taking it from here or there. But does that hold any water with you, or
if they were actually able to only take money from one pocket and put it in another, yes. But I find it hard to believe that that's what they're going to do, and that's why they're talking about VAT taxes, who we're going to tax, what programs should be in it. You can opt in, you can opt out. So I find it hard to believe that it's going to be paid for. So my assumption is there will be money printer will go brr.
let me ask you this thing.
That's what I think. I really do. And I understand that people think that inflation won't be there if they just put money from one pocket to the other. But on top of that, I also think you have to admit that they're taking a big chance if they do VAT taxes or just tax rich people. Well, that they often, or if they're only taking the money from taxes, right?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you where I'd like the money to come from.
If so, they're also going to be taking, I think, money out of more productive people's pockets and putting it into the pockets of less productive people.
Yeah.
So I also feel a pain in technology, things moving forward. I don't think that's a great idea because I don't think that we are just waiting for the next Beethoven or the next Tesla. Do you know what I mean? Beethoven, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos weren't waiting for a $12,000 a year handout to be who they were.
Sure.
That person is going to do it anyways. So
Well,
I don't believe that this is somehow passing money out and is going to create this
right.
productive super class of people who now don't have to worry about as much. So now they're all going to become artists
Yeah.
and all these wonderful things.
Right.
And most economics shows that people actually don't change their spending habits even when you give them more money. Their proportions end up staying the same. Meaning if you're spending a percentage on housing, a percentage on this, a percentage on entertainment, a percentage on your children. When you
Right.
get extra money, you end up dividing that into those proportions, as opposed to what I think is pushed a lot, that this is going to be this extra icing on top of the cake, and these
Right.
people are going to have this ball of extra money to
Yeah.
go do these extra awesome things.
Yeah.
People spend the money the same way. And
Well,
so if they're spending it the same way, they're
mhm.
going to push the prices up of things in all of the neighborhoods that get lots of cash all at once, and you will have supply shortages right off the bat. And then that's what's going to increase the prices up the line as well,
Right.
I think.
Well, let me ask you a clarifying question about a few things you said to make
Sure.
sure I'm following what you're saying. When you're talking earlier about the taxing of the rich or what have you, are you including, say, the Fortune 500 in that? In other words, I think very differently about the taxing of corporations than I do individual people because of the behaviors
Right.
and the impact.
I think, no, I think it's a myth to say we are not taxing people.
if we, what do you mean? So you mean,
Corporations and businesses are buildings and concepts.
okay,
The only people you can tax are people. So even if you say, I'm taxing Exxon, the
yeah,
oil company,
yeah,
the Exxon oil company just doesn't slide that over and go, damn, they got us. They don't
right.
take
Oh,
that
they
tax.
raised,
Their
they raised,
profits keep going up
gotcha.
because they don't react to these things the way it's sold to us. So
Right,
it comes back to us.
yeah,
We will pay the taxes and the
right,
prices of the products we use, no
right,
matter what way you structure on
right.
paper and in words to tax them.
I got you. And I don't disagree with that conceptually. Here's my problem though, is like, I get very frustrated when I think, because when people make the argument that, look, if you tax a company or a corporation, they'll just take away jobs or they'll go to Mexico or they'll just leave because, and I get that happens, right? But there reaches a tipping point, right? Where like, when we continued to give them dollars at one point, I finally realized that there's never enough when you're talking about the Fortune 500. Like we could set all their taxes to zero, it still won't be enough. They'll still ask for more tax credits or what have you, because that's the way organizations work, right? They're designed to continue to try to optimize and maximize and increase profit. There's no stop. There's no limit for them in that way. And if there's nothing we can do about it, it's like they hold us hostage then, you know?
I think they hold the government hostage is what they do, not.
And then in turn us though, right? Because I mean,
Right.
we treat this government as a separate entity and it behaves that way sometimes, but I mean, look, we get impacted, right? Like to your point, they raise costs on us. Bush and the tax cuts, I was curious as to how much it cost us, because I just remember when they went into effect, the first like couple of years, we were up to 4 trillion already or something crazy, or billion, I mean. And I'm like, that's a lot of damn money that we are now losing. And that to your point, Keith, I now have to pick up that damn tab. They were paying it. Now you got me paying it. And I work for those companies. They don't need it as much as I do. That's crazy. And what benefit did we get from it? And so it cost us, what they said, 2.1 trillion up till 2010 when they finally expired. But as a country, we took that on the chin like it was nothing, with the exception of us little guys who had to continue to pay taxes on it. But my point is, we've got the money as a country. It's sitting somewhere, though, out of circulation, not being circulated through the people, to your point. Our wealth is concentrated in the top 1% at the highest degree it's been since right before the Great Depression. Something will happen if that continues in that way. I agree with you that, the government takes a cut, but I'm like, it all ends up in the Fortune 500 at the end of the day. I don't care where it stops along the way. If you want to find out where your dollar lands and stays and doesn't go back into circulation, it's not going to be with the government. The government's broke. They spend it. They spend it all.
Right. No, I
bring my
got
money.
you, but
You know what I mean?
don't forget that those Fortune 500 companies are almost all the companies that are on in every 401k and retirement plan in the country.
Yeah, well, yeah, I
That
hear
I
you.
don't agree with that. That's scary, but it's not like people aren't also at the same time getting rich. Not everyone, but
Well,
there is
but,
a
People
middle
have money in the
class
stock
that is
market. How
also
many people have money in the stock market? I don't think
right
that's
now, hang on. Well, but
do
isn't it
how
true?
many people have 401ks,
Yeah.
yes. How many
IRAs?
people
They're
have
all
401ks? Let's start there.
Uh, well, we
lots
should
and
look at
lots of people. I
yeah,
don't have the
but,
numbers,
yeah,
but 401ks are a huge part. Not just 401ks,
yeah,
IRAs, savings accounts.
right.
People have stocks and bonds, so that um,
It-
that isn't another place
it-
where
it-
people end up getting wealth when those companies go
right,
up. It's
but
false right now
right,
because one of the reasons that money is sitting is because they're they do not want to flush the system with it. They can't
right,
just empty it. They do keep collecting all this wealth and more power
right. Well, not you're talking about
And
Wall
even
Street,
though I'm talking about the dollars, we're talking about they got
right?
trillions, they got money. The money is the problem. One of the reasons they can't release the money, like why banks didn't immediately just start lending money again once they were bailed out,
Right.
was because of the instant hyperinflation it would
Sure.
cause to just
Yeah.
flood the market with money.
Well,
So part of the I don't think it's the whole problem. It is partially what
yeah.
you're saying, but I'm also saying don't discount that they cannot flood the market
Well,
with that money without
well,
serious inflation.
but well, Keith, but they were able to crash the hell out of the market, go 30 to 1 in
Absolutely.
some cases. Like they don't give
And
a
they've
damn
blown it
about
up again. We're
But
going to do it again. They
we
blew it
are.
right back up
You and I
again.
are in
They
agreement.
did not let it
You and I are in agreement.
reset. They didn't let it
I agree.
reset.
I
They
agree.
just blew it back up. It's
I
going to be
agree.
worse than the last
Let me
one.
let me ask you this.
But those are government policies, not businesses, is my
Oh,
argument.
they but here's the thing. Government didn't trust me, that industry and its lobby has a big hand in what policies are set, they're not powerless and sitting
No, the
back,
Federal Reserve.
held
No, since
accountable.
1913, in the institution
Yeah,
of fractional reserve banking,
sure.
once they took us off any kind of solid monetary system and began to allow
Right.
everybody to fractionally reserve
Yep.
bank, and even to the point to where now insurance companies are allowed to fractionally reserve their
Right.
reserves for what they owe. There
Right.
is so much extra
But
money in the system that we don't even see. And
well
that
it's
inflationary
right,
pressure on everything is the
right.
problem, I think, which is government, not
Well,
not businesses.
How
this,
do you get to this? Not big business. Who
well,
all the
here's my
things you
thing.
named are big business things using fractional banking to take off.
Except the Federal
What?
Reserve.
Just
Well,
give that money
well,
to the people. Just give
The
$1,000
Federal
to the
Reserve.
people.
The Federal Reserve.
Start back
guys,
at
Why
the
are you
dollar.
ignoring the
They're
Federal
handing it to the
Reserve?
banks, and they're handing it to these
Why do
banks
you
that are
ignore the Federal Reserve?
I didn't ignore one bit the Federal Reserve.
well,
That's
It's the
government.
banks spending this
yeah,
money. The Federal
look,
Reserve may be giving it to the banks, but the banks are then investing in all kinds of crazy shit.
yeah.
So,
Well, so
Yeah,
here,
that's
how do
federal.
you
Oh,
not
I'm
get
sorry.
credit
Wait,
right,
wait. Slow
thing?
down.
So for you to just
Slow down.
stop
When I
at
said companies, I meant in general, corporations. I get you thought
right,
I meant just the banks because I'm saying it's the banking is the problem.
right,
Federal Reserve allowing banks to do
right,
fractional reserve banking is the
right.
problem. Banking itself as just a business
hmm
is absolutely wonderful and needed and one of the greatest institutions on the planet. But that's different than
okay.
Well,
fractional reserve banking.
It's a libertarian
That's different.
thing. I get it, I
yeah,
get
but
it.
hang on. No, but banking itself is, but that's not what they're doing either
Right,
nowadays.
right.
They're also investing in the market and gambling the hell out of things like they didn't
That's
used
what
to
they're
back in the
taking.
day.
That's
And
why
the
they're
Federal
taking
Reserve,
that money. They're not giving it to the people. They're
let
not
me ask
giving
you
it
this
to
for a
the
minute though,
system.
guys. I also
They
feel like
are,
the labels
again,
between government and the Fortune 500 is where we might also disagree. I increasingly see government and the Fortune 500 as one. They function as one.
I do
They don't
too.
want to give that perception.
I
but
do
from a
too.
power standpoint, they collaborate. They decide, government invites them to come in and write the bills and write the policy. Let me ask you this. This is something that frustrated me about the collapse since you brought it up. And it kind of illustrates for me a point that I think we agree on, is that John Stewart, I remember, floated this idea after the collapse, which was they're trying to figure out what to do, right?
Right.
In terms of bailout, where the hell is the money going to come from? Paulson was, everybody's stressing, didn't know where the bottom was and how are we going to recover? And eventually, of course, it had to be the bailout, right? And you saw these capitalists and these Republicans and conservatives that were, ideologically tortured to have to turn around and be socialist and bail out, corporations that were too big to fail, but that did. And I thought to myself, well, instead of giving them the money directly, I shouldn't say I thought to myself, Stewart said it, but I'm like, it's a damn good idea, which is, why not give the American people a mortgage voucher that they then can't use for anything else? It's a voucher, right? Other than to pay off their mortgages. The bank still gets the money because you can't use it for anything else. But at least by giving the bank the money, to your point when you said circulate earlier and people get it first, I'm so on board with you. You and I are in lockstep on that one. This is what that does, though. You would have helped out all these homeowners, that owed on their mortgages and clearly had struggled with what was happening in the economy, and the bank still would have got their money. But this is how damn greedy they are, and it's not the Federal Reserve or laws that stop them from doing it. The banking lobby didn't let that happen simply because, no, just give us the money right away, directly. Don't.
Because they own the Congress.
We're going to keep charging the guy that owns the mortgage.
Not only do they own the Congress, but that was so bad what they did.
Right?
You're talking about an incredible economic collapse, like a Great Depression. And so they hijacked, they took us hostage and said, sorry, we made such bad deals. The entire thing's about to cave. You got to bail us out or everyone goes down.
Let me ask you,
although I still think they should have said no. And every bank that did that should have failed.
That would have been a painful process. But, let me ask you this.
But it would have been ripping the Band-Aid off instead of what we keep doing every time this happens and dragging it out for another 10, 15 years, destroying our economy over that time, as opposed to ripping the Band-Aid off. They call it the plucking method as far as graphs. What's supposed to happen with a depression or a recession is a straight line and a V down, and then you correct it and you get a big up.
Right.
It's called the check mark. A plucking. The further down you pull it, the faster the return, and you usually go above where you began the crash.
Right.
During the Great Depression, with all of the intervention, it wasn't. It was one of the few graphs that dive bombed and then took 10 years.
Right.
Because of what we're doing, by not just letting them fail, we're going to do that again. Just like we did through Obama. It was such a slow recovery instead of a quick V. Was because of what we were doing and because they didn't let it fail. So they're gonna do it again when it bombs. They're gonna bail them out again, and we're gonna continue on this slow. They're not letting the bust. No.
Yeah, right.
Boom bust would be awesome. I'm saying they won't allow them to bust, and now it's getting worse.
Right. That little concept earlier of the voucher, for example, is. Can you think of a reason why that wouldn't be better than what we did? Is there a reason that you can think of economically or for any reason, really?
In other words, it saves the banks, and we're right where we are. And then they end up selling derivatives and futures on those, packaging those together and creating another investment package that people can invest in. Does that make sense?
No, it does. I guess what I was talking about is all we did was bail out the banks and not the people.
Right.
If we'd done the voucher thing, we would have bailed out the people and the banks.
Sure. And I'm saying, though,
I hear you shouldn't be bailing out anybody.
Even making it a voucher.
Say it again, Paul.
$1,000, you could have had a lot better savings. You could have been more prepared.
And that's where I'm.
Lost your job for a while. You could have let the economy reset. You could have done these other things if you had $1,000. If your base food and your base living wasn't threatened at any economic crash, you would have been fine.
When I said earlier that people don't change their spending habits, that's what I was talking about. People aren't going to take the $1,000 and save it for a rainy day. They're going to buy some extra food, some extra clothes, and they're going to continue spending in the same proportion. So if they didn't save before, they're not saving now.
Yeah, well, Keith, hang on though. I think it depends on.
You have to save. You have $1,000. Also, yeah, maybe immediately people's spending habits wouldn't change. Sure, it takes time. But to have 12 grand a year and to be able to plan further ahead and to have those plans is how people with money make good plans. You can't build a pot without clay. You can't grow things without seeds. You need these seed money in all kinds of ways to grow and to sustain. $1,000 a month means that if you did lose your job, you have a little while that it's not going to be desperate. If the economy crashes, you can pay a good portion of your mortgage and survive. You don't need as much savings.
So, but hang on a second, guys, because Keith, we're making some assumptions when you say about the spending habits, and I get that. But I don't think it is universal. I think it does depend on
not well, just so you know, it's not an assumption. It's part of praxeology. It's part of economics. It is part of a class. So it's not.
What do you mean by that? Because
say it again. I didn't hear you. I didn't hear the beginning of that, Paul. Say it again.
What do you mean that's a fact? First of all, where did you get that? Secondly,
I didn't say it was a fact.
Guys.
Then what do you mean? Then how are you saying they spend the same money the same way?
Well,
the way Jabari said.
With that conclusion?
Well, here's the thing. I agree with
the way. Give me 1 second, Jabari, and then I'll stop. The way Jabari said it was, "Why are you making that assumption?" And so I didn't say it was a fact. I said it's not an assumption. I've learned this through other study, through something called praxeology and economics. It is a economic theory, but of course, I didn't mean like it's fact. There is a place you can go learn about that or study that. That's all. Go ahead, Jabari. Sorry. We cut you off there for a while.
What little I know of the different social classes and their spending habits in terms of, how they do use any additional income that comes in. It depends on which social class you're talking about. When you get out of people that are not meeting their basic needs, that's when I think what Keith is saying, I agree with not seeing the data or looking at the data, that when you start looking at that, people tend not to vary much in their spending habits. Where I disagree with it is when you're talking about the 65% of America that doesn't pay federal tax because they don't make enough to owe. And in those cases, you're talking about people who are one paycheck away from missing a rent payment or, something of that nature and going into debt. What oftentimes has people filing bankruptcy in those instances is something medical happens, the car breaks down, anything of that nature. And for what people in the upper classes wouldn't be a big deal, for them, it turns into this catastrophic setback. And that's where I think the $1,000 in that segment of America could make a difference. You made a comment earlier too about the Gateses of the world being in jobs being whoever they are, and they're going to emerge anyway. And I agree with you on that. But I think there's also potentially a large segment of folks out there that would be maybe not your Gates, but maybe the guy who thought of Radio Shack.
Right. Not everybody has to be a Gates. I get you, right?
Yeah, you know what I mean. So there's folks who never realize their true potential that we then also do miss out on in America in terms of what they could have done. You might be the guy that comes up with a better headset for your Zoom before your meeting and your show, and does very well off of that. But use that $1,000 to finish his degree or whatever it is.
Right. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
One last comment and I'll shut up.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
About that. My dad, for example, was a psychology and social work master's in psychology. And his first job out of college at U of I was to counsel single mothers to get off of welfare. And I remember him telling me at an early age that he had to tell them to do the opposite. His job was to get them off, but as he'd evaluate their situation, again and again, he'd do the math and run the numbers, and simply because of healthcare and insurance, he said, it would be probably not a good idea or responsible for you right now, given your current employment opportunities, resources, and education, to, give up the coverage you have for the family, which was frustrating for him because here you are supposed to be getting them off because of the way the circumstances. Right. It'd be bad advice. Right. I never forgot that because again, that advice, right? That applies to a certain segment of social class that's in a certain situation that's challenging. That's where I think you'd see the biggest impact of this potentially. But we keep bringing it up, and I feel like we're not all disagreeing as much as we think we are either, because we're quibbling over, like you said earlier, Keith, why not give them $12,000 back? Which tells me you're not against the concept of some type of resource being provided to individual Americans.
No, I am against it. I just am making the point that
you're just using
is there need? It's just it's the same thing. You're just taking more.
Well, what about
through inflation? Well, here, let me ask you this real quick. Based on the person you were talking about, that your dad was counseling.
Yeah. Single mom.
Isn't that the majority of people that are going to not opt in for the $12,000 based on exactly his experience? That is kind of what I'm saying, that based on that type of experience, that he would also be advising her not to take the $12,000 a year. Don't opt in because you're making so much more through all of these other programs I can sign you up for. It wouldn't be advantageous.
Why do you keep saying they're making so much more money with these other programs? I think one of Andrew Yang's things that you're getting this information is that no, it's actually a much smaller amount that are on over $1,000, and that this would wipe tons of it. His numbers say the opposite of what you're saying, is that this is going to wipe out most of those 120 programs. So why do you keep saying that this is going to, like, people aren't going to opt into this? His numbers that you're coming from say the opposite.
Well, but Keith, make sure I understand the question you're asking. Right. So are we saying, Paul or Keith, either of you, are we saying that if they go forward with UBI, people, for example, would have to give up their Medicaid?
Right. All like 126 programs. All 126 programs.
But like year one?
No, he's got exceptions. The exceptions are...
I feel like to get to a place where the benefit of that allows you to eliminate a program like, say, Medicaid, which is what my dad was saying.
I thought what Paul was saying was that the programs are not as much as 12,000, that the 12,000 would be more. And to prove that, he was saying that even the Andrew Yang numbers I was putting forward say that the amount of the 126 programs is less than the 208 trillion. Therefore, the woman in your example would obviously opt in because she's obviously making more. Is that right, Paul? Was that a good...
Let me explain this.
Okay, so no?
Let me explain it, because
that's where I need clarification too.
Yeah. Okay. So what Andrew Yang is talking about is that you're going to save $800 billion on removing programs. He didn't say specifically.
I thought he said $1.5 trillion.
What making what? The programs he said
I thought he said $1.5 trillion, not $800 billion. It was $208 trillion for the new program for the UBI. The 126 programs is $1.5 trillion, and the leftover is going to be paid with a VAT tax or income tax or something, right?
But I gotta believe
that's what it was.
There's some progression on that over time, right? Like that can't be what happens year one.
I'm assuming. I think that is an immediate thing. Like they send the checks out and then they have to, right. If there's some ease into it, I don't remember if he said a transition period over 5 years, we're going to eliminate these 3 programs and then add, plus the opt-in thing, I don't understand. What are you opting into if we eliminate all 26? Or are we going to just, going to say it again?
Snaps is a big one that will be removed.
Yeah, right.
Let me look up the list. There's a good list of them. The things he said won't be removed are Social Security, Medicaid, and housing assistance. All other assistance would get removed. That's from his website, though. There may be more details than that.
Right. The other thing I haven't heard us talk about that I heard mentioned when I was looking into this was, which I thought was interesting and something I hadn't thought of, was that because you're taking that $1,000 and putting it in the hands of, so in other words, when you give a tax cut to the wealthy, they don't take that money and put it back in the economy typically, right? They don't have to spend it right away. when you give the poor a welfare check, to your point, Keith, it doesn't go in the bank. They got to spend it right away.
You know what?
Right?
I was
'Cause
about
they're
to
broke.
bring that up. I was actually about to bring that up because I think it counters the point that they don't pay enough taxes. Because on other issues, often I hear people who argue for UBI will argue what you're saying, that is, people of lower income spend the most money as consumers, pay the most sales taxes,
Percentage.
and right.
Right.
So why don't we limit their sales tax?
Right.
See, that's what I'm saying, is that
Yeah,
it's more
yeah.
than just income tax. And people,
Right.
if you're going to argue on one end that people of lower income pay a lot more than rich people because they're the ones who
Right.
consume the most, then let's give them a break in sales tax too and see if we can get closer to that 12,000 through not taking money instead of taking and redistributing.
But I feel like that's still just another way of distributing it, to be honest with you. All you're doing is you know,
Not taking it?
yeah, I mean, at least in circulation in that way. And here's the thing, though, like, how do you track, like, what if I'm somebody who just doesn't go out and buy a lot of stuff? You know, I'm pretty homebound. I'm just a recluse, and, you know,
Right.
but to your point, there is somebody who goes to 7-Eleven every day and gets their drinks and their whatever they have you like.
Right.
With a program like UBI, at least you are aware of where the dollars are going and managing it, and that it is across the board for whatever, I guess, demographic you're targeting. With taxes, I feel like it's a little more difficult. But let me ask you again.
Wouldn't it be less difficult, though? Wouldn't it
or-
be less difficult just not doing something as opposed to creating a whole system to do stuff? I'm talking about doing less. I don't have to take your money. I don't have the paperwork. As an employer, I don't have to go through the entire paperwork of collecting extra money and then sending it into the government. I have less work. I can afford to hire more people.
That money, this whole cycle you're discussing.
Sorry, well, start that over again. Start that over again.
If you're poor and you don't have that much money, this whole cycle doesn't even matter to you.
So
giving $1,000 to people will get the economy moving and start getting them learning the right things, starting to learn how to budget, how to do things.
Do poor people pay the sales tax or not?
Economic twirl. That's all currency is anyways. We're trying to generate a back and forth between people purchasing things. So $1,000 to each person should be generating many benefits more than the taxation. Taxation just is. It always has been and always will. I think there's definitely a good discussion on how big or how little sales tax should be. But then again, you're talking about states that are in charge of that. And remember, if you are below the poverty line of $15,000 in America, and something like 30 to 40% of us are, yeah, your habits will be the same when I add another 12 grand to it. You want to know why? Because you didn't have enough food. You didn't have enough shelter. You didn't have enough of these things. So it makes a lot of sense that it takes a certain amount of money to a certain level before we're going to change spending habits. But also remember, the spending habits there will help. If a bad neighborhood, say a crappy town, goes down, there's 2,000 people, that's an instant $2 million shot in the arm per month to that town. That creates mechanics, that creates trade, that creates buying each other's stuff. Having a $2 million influx into a small town in 2000 does amazing things for that local economy. You're taking money from the top, you're putting it back at the very bottom for the economy, and you're pushing this. This is the entire concept of every sport we play professionally.
But Keith, you don't even
agree. We do it to make sure that things are competitive.
But Keith, you don't even agree with the tax cut example you're giving, though, right? Like, that's just an example of a better way to do it. But you're saying you shouldn't do that either, right?
I don't believe in UBI at all. I don't believe in UBI at all. Correct. But I'm trying to make the point of how what you're asking for is even worse than just not taxing somebody.
Right.
And I'm always for less taxes. So I don't like taxes. Taxing less seems like a much better idea. Plus all of the paperwork you don't have to do.
Right.
It's less work. And these people get their money back.
Yeah. But you, in your case, you have to completely eliminate the tax. You can't just lower it, because then you still have to do paperwork. If all you do is lower it, that doesn't cut administratively.
No, if I don't have to collect it.
Right. Okay.
Right? If I don't have to collect it, then I don't have to do anything with it.
But, well, guys, here's what I guess I'm struggling with too, is whether it's UBI, whether it's tax cuts, when you look at other countries, you know, in the industrialized world, whether it's Canada, who subsidizes their healthcare and their education, or Europe that does that similarly, or Denmark right now, you know, call it UBI, call it a fragmented UBI, call it UBI that goes through taxes or goes through, you know, a subsidized education credit. Like at the end of the day, I look around and I'm seeing governments finding ways to support their or invest in their population. Because at the end of the day, those tax dollars aren't the government's. They're not the Fortune 500s. They're ours. You know, it's our money that you know, they're
stealing,
circulating through the government to the Fortune 500. And where you and I might differ a little bit, Keith, is, you know, we can label it government, private sector. When we start talking about high level, you know, Fortune 500 and the government, they're like that to me. They're in bed together. They're one.
Hey, real quick, I just want to interject. When you get a chance, I got a bunch of things about UBI I want to discuss.
Oh, yeah.
And the financial part is important, but I think it's also important that we go through things, because honestly, the finances are the least important thing to me. And I 100%, where it's more important to the both of you, I 100% get that. But I would also like to hit about 10 other points.
It's not. We can move on to other points. You can just bring them up when you want to. And no, I don't think it's the most important part.
I don't think they blend well unless I had said that. All right, so benefits of universal basic income. One, forced military reduction. When you look on why people join the military,
right?
I read about 4 articles. They all say money, 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 money. Some of it I don't think is 100% because they all say either like 70 to 80% is my financial choice.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's 100% accurate because they add things like the job training as pure money. I don't think that's pure money. That's good job training. That doesn't always have just a financial plus. But almost everyone agreed, nah, money was a big part of it.
The training doesn't have monetary.
People in the military, it's going to be very hard to sustain the size of military we have. And a reduction in military and a reduction of a reason you go into the military, I think it would be very good to reduce military and eventually military spending if they don't have the people to do it.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to get me started on the military industrial complex and how much welfare money we give them on an annual basis. You know, it's.
Hey, do we agree we all want a smaller military?
What's that?
Do we all agree we want a smaller military?
Yes.
I do. I don't know, Keith.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. And I'm not saying this means you think this is the path. I'm just saying.
Obviously not.
A smaller military would be better.
I'm looking up right now the dollars we spend on defense each year.
800 billion before a recent tweak.
Freaking ridiculous.
That was before a recent tweak. So I don't know. We just had that thing with.
This is where I get.
You know what? If you eliminate, you know, close to 2/3 of the budget through the welfare stuff, and you get rid of the military budget almost completely, we're almost at 100% money back. Why don't we just not tax the people? Just throwing
because
it out there.
I want that money to the very bottom ring. You keep forgetting that.
I don't care what it doesn't matter what you want.
Without jobs, single moms,
your
mothers
want isn't an issue. Your want isn't the issue.
Well,
yes, my want is exactly the issue. That's why I'm bringing this up. It's because of my want. It is 100% the issue.
I mean, I just don't see that taxes are the reason that the people in poverty are in poverty, for example. You know,
I agree.
I don't feel like it's poor people that are our budget issue. It's rich people that are our budget issue, not people, companies. Because again, I disagree that it's individuals. You know, when you tax Apple, not the same thing as taxing just, you know, one rich guy and putting it down.
You're right. He passes it on to us. It's still people who pay taxes, even if you put
Right.
that tax label
Right.
on a company name. There
Yep.
is no entity called
So,
Exxon or Chevron that cuts checks. There's a
right.
treasurer who cuts checks because
Right.
she's told to by somebody else. It's
Yep.
still people. In disconnecting this, I'm
Well,
just
that's a weird
taxing the
disconnect.
500
No, that's a
fortune.
very
No,
weird
you're
disconnect.
taxing
Just because
people.
human beings sign a check, there's not a corporation. What? Explain that.
I mean, well, no, but here's the thing. Well, because earlier you were talking about 401ks, right? That's where you see the connection mostly.
Say it
And
again.
you were
I
saying
missed it.
401ks is where you see the most connection between the public, people in
Well,
general,
I guess
and
it's
Wall
one of the.
Street, or
It's a
Fortune
big
500.
exposure for a
Right.
good
For a lot of
portion
folks.
of the. Right, but
Right.
that's not what I'm talking about right now. If that.
We're just saying that theoretically, it doesn't matter it's a company you're talking about. People make up a company. So when you hit a company tax-wise, you're hitting people, is what you're saying.
Correct. Right. You're not hitting a company, you're hitting people, no matter what the entity, whether it's a corporation or an LLC or whatever letters are in front of it.
Because of the increased cost. Got
It
it.
is a concept. It is the number 4. You can't tax the number 4. You can't tax a corporation. You can only tax people.
Because the corporation is going to pass the tax along.
Because it doesn't exist. It has to pass it on. The
No, they couldn't
corporation is a
they couldn't
concept
afford it.
that doesn't produce anything. The people
Well-
in the company, it's just in an organizational system, and the people pay the taxes.
Yeah, but
so
I
if the
can't
people in
go-
charge of the companies don't want to pay the taxes, they
Yeah.
pass it on to other people.
Yeah, but that's also not always the case. Somebody doesn't always have to pass it on. They could just take the hit.
They
They
could.
could reduce
You're
their
right.
profit margin.
They
that year.
could.
They take a loss that quarter. You know?
And when we get the angels to come and take care of the governments and corporations, and
Right.
they make those choices,
Right,
we
right.
won't even have to have this
Yeah,
discussion.
I hear
But
you.
until then,
We're
it's
at their
people.
We're at their mercy from a tax standpoint. I have to pay their taxes because they won't, because
real
I can't
quick,
raise
so what do
prices
you
on
think
people, but
about
they can.
UBI reducing the military.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, here's my thing. Like,
Sure.
if we
I-
handle
I-
the federal
Right.
defense budget.
Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead, bud.
I was just going to say,
I'm
if
writing
we
mine down.
address the real welfare in the room, which is defense contractors, Boeing, Lockheed, those are the guys that are taking tax dollars and who I'm covering their taxes for, and who are taking way more of our federal budget, in proportion to the 65% that aren't paying taxes, people that aren't paying taxes right now, and use those dollars and shift those dollars to, instead of helping the corporations and the people that make up those corporations, which I would argue those people don't need my tax dollars, they're good. I know a lot of other people that could use my tax dollars though. And I get some ROI out of them, by the way, then, and I get that you're not about taxes at all, but would you have a problem with UBI if instead of taking, and just theoretical here, let's say the numbers worked, that I could take all that money from defense and then run my UBI program? Would you be opposed to that and stick with the option of, let's just keep the status quo and do what we're doing, which you also don't agree with, I know, but if you only had to choose between the two, theoretically, would you have a problem with UBI in that instance? If all the money came from the defense budget?
Sure, but you're creating a hypothetical.
I know.
I mean, I can answer a
It's helping me
hypothetical.
understand if you're
But,
right. Got it.
but if you're asking me if I just feel taxation is theft, yes, and I don't think the ends justifies the means. I don't feel the ends justifies the means either. Just because it shrinks the military, or just because you do figure out a way to perfectly not raise inflation through expansion of the monetary, or through expansion of just the money, I still see other problems with it, and I don't think it justifies what bad economic problems it's going to cause in the future.
There's more negatives than positives, you feel?
Overall, no matter how you end up doing it.
When you say taxes are theft, and who in your mind stealing the money, specifically in other words, to me,
I think we as people are quite capable of paying fees for almost all of the services that we get from government.
Mhm.
Libertarians believe that you still need it for military, roads, Hoover Dam.
Yep.
I go the step further. I'm an anarchist. I don't believe in the government. I believe in rules, not rulers.
Right.
I believe everything from roads to the Hoover Dam could be built by us, because when the government wants to do these things, it doesn't go and do it. It hires us. And most things that the government already does, or took on the control of, was already being done by private citizens in almost every instance. They come and they take over what we have already done and then claim it's
ownership.
Only the government could do it.
Right.
I mean, that's my anarchist ideology. I understand.
Yeah. But that's why I was asking. That helps me understand.
Right. I'm just going over my anarchist the way I see it. And I understand that anarchist is different now. That people say anarchist, they see, like, you've got anarchists and Antifa right now. I see it as the original rulers. I mean, no rulers, just rules, in the sense of Gandhi. If you've ever heard Gandhi talk about anarchism being the freest form of man, free of government, that is the type anarchist I am.
Yep.
There you go.
Well, I'm marinating on that.
It's all right. It's a big tangent. You do not have to go there. And Paul has at least 8 more things we got to go through. No veering. I blame Jabari.
Yeah. But I try not to get into the tribalism that we see today in today's politics. I also try not to be, I have no marriage to any ideology, even though you could label me and identify an ideology with me. I'm about outcomes at the end of the day. So, like, theoretically, I used to
equality of outcomes as opposed to equality of opportunity, or
meaning that some people will, I believe there's certain Republicans or Democrats where just because it's a Republican idea, they're not going to be down with it, or just because it's a Democratic idea, they're not going to be down with it. I don't care who came up with it. What I want to know is, will it solve the damn problem? I can care less. Those two parties can switch platforms today, and I'll become a Republican versus Democrat. I just don't give a damn about that. I'm more concerned about the problems we have and getting them solved. Theoretically, I'd love to be a libertarian. I don't like government. Why? I want to be free. Why do we need government? And to your point, rulers, or what have you. But and I used to prescribe, I think, much more of a libertarian, ideology when I was younger. The problem I started running into with it were the issues that weren't getting solved by the private sector. The increasing wealth disparity. The education issues that we're having. Like, when I think about UBI, take all the economical problems that you're pointing out could potentially happen, and in your mind aren't potentials, they will. But I see countries investing in their people, when it comes to education. I'll never forget being U of I and going to CAMS and quarter beers night on a Sunday, and I'm walking past the student union, ready to get my drink on because I want some quarter beers. I'm at that age, ready to throw them down, have a good time that night. I walk past the student union, I look in, and something just caught my eye. I kind of double take it. It's all Asian students, Indian students and Asian students, studying hard on a Friday night. And I walk a couple more blocks and I get to CAMS, and it's all white people and people like me, getting ready to get their drink on that night. And I remember thinking to myself, how does this play out in 10 years? Those guys have got the noses in the books. And when you look at the data and compare us on math and science, I shudder sometimes when I think about, what's the future hold from an educational standpoint. And, China will send their kids to school 6 days a week. They don't give a damn. They're on it. They're on it. And I just look at us and, if you assign too much homework, you're going to hear from the local suburb moms. And so how does it position us is what I'm thinking. And I hear you saying, well, don't do it UBI then, just give people their money. We'll find a way to compete, or a better way to compete. And I mean, I'm not saying I wholeheartedly disagree with you, other than that, we seem to have these gaps where somebody has to intervene because something's not functioning right, and maybe sometimes you can find it's the banking system, or it's because government has a policy that's preventing it. Like, even now, though, I look at our infrastructure, our electrical infrastructure, our roads, our bridges. Like the country's falling apart. We're up on stilts here in a minute, we're up on bricks.
And we're paying gasoline taxes, we're paying road taxes,
yeah.
and nothing's getting built.
Right. And in one argument,
so
say, well, hey,
just giving us that money back instead of UBI, right. It's not like you're taking it from things being built. Sorry, that was a cheap shot. I apologize.
I'm right with you. No, right. No, but I guess what I struggle with, again, is I always point the finger at the freaking Fortune 500, because whenever I follow the problem and get to the root of it, at the end of the day, there's some damn lobbyist who has made sure they're going to get those dollars, whether it's stimulus that just went out. Hell, we passed UBI. Watch, somehow the Fortune 500 will find a freaking way to put a loophole in that program where they get a piece of that action too.
Right.
And for me, when I hear
let's move on though.
Yeah. Okay.
Just because we're.
You're right.
We're going to keep going on the same subject. See,
do you
there we go.
think
He's ready.
They should reduce the military? What do you think?
Are you really asking again?
Yes, Jabari. You
say it again. Say it again.
Yeah.
Do you think
maybe I'm missing the question?
Reduce the military?
Yes.
Do I think UBI would reduce the military?
Yes.
Well,
I don't know.
To go in.
I mean, I get what you're saying. I hear the concept, but do I know that? No. I guess it sounds feasible, but I don't know it. No.
I think it'll reduce the amount of people enlisting. I don't think it will stop Boeing and Lockheed and Northrop Grumman from expanding the budget for our tax dollars every year with their hands out. You know, I remember hearing about a fighter program, a F whatever, I don't know, all the bells and whistles. Pentagon didn't want the plane. They couldn't kill the program because the senator or congressman or whoever that had been lobbied by Boeing were in bed together and Pentagon, you're getting this plane whether you want it or not. You know, I don't know how many billions the damn thing costs, but I'll never forget that because I'm like, really? The Pentagon doesn't want the plane. And it's going like, so this is just a vehicle to give Boeing my tax dollars is really what it is. We're not even really, we don't even build the plane. Just give them more money because that's all it is. It's a vehicle for giving them my money, which is why when you say government all the time, I'm like.
And who knows where the money really goes to? Who knows where the money's going to? Like, here's the conspiracy theory.
Goes where though?
Maybe Boeing is then shipping it off into other types of shell companies that the CIA, the FBI, the NSA get to use, or the military police. They do that with all kinds of companies. So you got to assume our biggest contractors are also helping our clandestine groups launder money, drugs, and weapons. So I assume that's part of it. I don't know that, but when they get those outrageous contracts, I assume that's part of it is why.
But it still just means the government's just a laundering vehicle because that money still gets spent.
Right.
The government doesn't, you know, they're broke every year. They're broke every freaking, always need more money. They spend it on somebody. Somebody's got those dollars. It's sitting somewhere.
You're just making more anarchists is all you're doing.
What's that?
So all you're doing is making more anarchists.
Well,
I'm kidding.
Well, they got us fighting over crumbs off the table, I guess is my point. So Paul's point, it'll reduce the amount of people enlisting, in my opinion. But will it kill the budget? I don't know how much impact will have.
I get it. I mean that if people aren't, if they're not desperate, if people on the margins is what we're talking about, really. If people on the margins to where 12,000 changes their life enough to make a different decision rather than going to the military, I guess. But a lot of people, when they're going to the military, are taking care of other situations like the sick mom or my family has no money. So that 12,000, I don't know how many people it's actually going to change their mind to go and make and get the benefits. A lot of what people go into the military for too is not just that paycheck. It's not a lot. What they're going in for is the continued benefits that they get that are outrageous compared to $12,000. So I don't think $12,000 is enough to change enough people's mind to affect the amount of people joining enough in the way you're saying. I don't see it.
But I think if I'm a guy who's about to enlist and you're telling me you're going to pay me 12 grand to stay home, and I can get a job that keeps me at home, plus the 12 grand, I'll probably stay home, you know?
I think college is more affordable, at least trade school or something 2 years is. I think community school is more affordable.
Not after everybody gets $12,000 a year. They'll increase their prices.
and every household has 2.5 people on average in America. So you're not just talking about 12 grand to an individual.
Right.
You're talking about an average of 30 grand to each household. That adds up.
Right.
More people
and
going
it
to
adds
church.
up to higher prices for college. They're not going
Not
to just.
necessarily.
Oh,
Not
absolutely.
necessarily.
What,
Absolutely.
what has
So-
happened to the price of college since we started subsidizing it through loans? What has happened to the price? It is absolutely going
Yeah,
out
that's
the
out of
roof,
control,
and
but
everybody complains
That's
about
not
it.
fair.
It's
Because
it's not
we've also
fair.
defunded education. You've also defunded education and not paid for education.
Who
You have
defunded
paid less
education?
of the
I'm
GDP
missing it.
Year
I
after
missed
year
that
after
part.
year. So as education reduces and you pay
Oh,
less
in
into
general.
it, of course it's going to cost more.
Right, in
That's
general?
common sense.
What do you mean by they're putting
Well-
less money in education?
well, Because higher education is the same thing as public. Like, because higher education is turned into a damn business. That's why the loans are outrageous. And
Right.
tuition's
Well, he
outrageous.
said
But also,
college.
the government
He
is
said
giving
college.
less and less of GDP to
Yeah.
education.
Right.
So our high schools have been defunded. Our middle schools have been defunded.
Okay,
our
but you
grade
said
schools have been
college.
defunded.
You're
Our
just-
college has been
Okay,
defunded.
I know you're just
All these
switching.
schools have been
The
defunded by
colleges
the
aren't
government.
defunded.
So it would make perfect sense that these
Colleges
things
are
become more and more
defunded?
expensive.
The
Yes.
colleges are not defunded. They get huge amounts of money.
No,
Do you
we
know
have-
how many
They get less
billions of dollars they get
GDP
in
than they used to.
research money
They
from
get
the
less
government?
GDP than they used to.
Get Pell Grants and much.
And so they
Their
raise their
numbers.
prices. So they raise the prices to tuition. Why do you, I mean, it is a known pretty much entity that because of the increase in subsidizing of education, the prices have gone up. Why wouldn't it do the same where UBI?
Wait a minute. I don't
Shake
get
your
that.
head.
Why-
No, but yeah,
What is
that's
I
subsidizing?
disagree completely. Is that
all right. Well,
no,
Okay.
no.
you can disagree all you want. It's just it's a fact. Shake
I
your
don't-
head all you want. I hope the audience will go look it up.
Yeah.
Do you have a site or anything for that?
Yeah, well, no, because
On me? No. Do you have a site for everything you said tonight?
Right.
Come on. Of course.
Yes, that's why I got them already. I got sites for all kinds of stuff, and I even got sites for the
For all
next one.
kinds of
First
stuff. I got some
population, when
sites
you're
for
ready.
stuff too, but no, I don't have a site for everything that comes out of my mouth. That's a cheap
Well,
like,
that's a big
argument
one.
thing.
That's
Do
a
you have a
big one.
site?
To say the entire college debt crisis is
No.
due to
No, it's not what I said.
loans being
No,
funded by the
that's
government.
not what I said.
That's a big deal. That's
It's
a
not
large
what I
statement.
said. That's another straw man.
Oh,
You
explain
stack
that.
them up
No.
behind you
Oh,
like
explain that
pillows.
better.
I saw an uncitable documentary somewhere, which I don't remember they what.
See? Right.
But-
No, you can't talk
but hear me
about it.
out.
We only do sites here. And
But
if you
they
give
were
an
talking
analogy, it has to be perfectly
Yeah.
equal.
They were looking at the increased cost of tuition in universities, and a lot of what they were pointing to was kind of an arms race between universities for amenities, staff. They're just out of control. Nobody's checking it. Budgets for instruction are smaller and smaller. More for research, more for contracts with Fortune 500.
More for humanities, more
Yeah, and they're becoming business.
more for counseling, more
yeah.
for you're pointing out the parts of colleges that have shrunk, the good parts. But
Well,
the rest
no,
of
but
it
I'm
has
saying
expanded.
nobody's-
The departments for humanities, the departments for what's
But I
the
don't-
new thing now? You're not guidance count. I'll come back to it if I think of it. It's
Replacement, you mean, for
no the
students?
that's all right. I'll think of it.
Occupational
I'll think of
stuff.
it. Yeah, like the whole new counselor system. You have so
Yeah.
many non-teaching staff in colleges
Right.
now. It's insane, and those
Well,
are the
look-
parts that are increasing the cost.
In the
And then they're
40s,
turning into research places, so they're spending money to bring people in everywhere
That's
they can.
exactly it. That's exactly it. But
Right.
the cost argument to me doesn't hold water because they're making money, and that money is just getting placed other
Yeah.
places than the students, and they're making the students pay for it. The 2 years
Sure.
I was at U of I, which I think it was the 4 I transferred in, but tuition went up 30% just in that time frame that I was there. I don't even know how people afford college this day and age. I really don't. I had a buddy
Because
who
they keep
graduated.
increasing the amount you can get through grants and loans.
Well,
Those
and
things
you're
keep
bringing up another-
increasing, and so they get to keep increasing their prices. The correlation between the two has been
Yeah.
shown in study after study after study, and it sounds
But-
like the study you had, or
Yeah.
bringing up, also talks about it, but a different part that's
Right.
making it go up.
They've been driving it. But you were talking about UBI here. I got a buddy who was a roommate of mine for a little while, younger guy, he's in his early 30s. And the poor kid was crippled with student loan debt. Like he was telling me what he had to pay monthly. It was insane. He had done every deferment that he could, what have you, and he'd been through Groupon, a few other jobs. He was still trying to, kind of get stable. But I remember thinking to myself, if I had that kind of debt, I can't imagine.
And they won't let him discharge the debt? They won't let him discharge the debt either. It's a horrible system.
That's just it.
It's a horrible system.
You're talking about something that's a national crisis in terms of the student loan debt has eclipsed credit card debt in this country, which is pretty bad because we're consumers to the nines, right? Like we've got tons of credit card debt. But when student loan debt exceeds that, to your point, Keith, in terms of having a crash again and having a problem, and if UBI money is getting paid for by the Fortune 500, we need it fast for what's coming, simply just goddamn student loan debt, if nothing else. I'm not saying that's the problem solution to everything, but point to your point really is all about.
I've heard this a lot. How do you think the cost will be passed on to the corporations and take money out of the pockets of the people you want it to take out of? Does that make sense? How do you really get money out of the CEO's pocket and put it in poor people as opposed to a shell game where they just charge us for...
Well, here's my thing. You're right. They got checkmate, right? Because they run the government. At the end, they run the government. So what I would have said in a theoretical world is do what Canada and other industrialized countries do, like to Big Pharma. No, you're not charging $500 for this pill here. You're going to charge $12 for it. Why? Because we said so, and because you're going to help our citizens in our country because we've given you infrastructure and a market, by the way, to become a very wealthy business. Which is why when I tax you as a corporation, it's not theft. You're going to pay back into the market that you have been pulling out of, as far as I'm concerned. Right now, they're not doing that. Fortune 500 is not paying back in to this market beyond the people they're employing, who they're not giving raises to, by the way, for the last 30 years. There's got to be something, Keith, we can do about that, because when I hear you say that, what I hear is we're powerless against them. They'll always just pass it on. There's nothing we can do. And there's examples where that's not always the case. But you're right now that we are checkmated because they do run the government. So I don't know how we would hold them accountable until we can, get them out somehow. I mean, seriously, between the two parties, who's going to do anything about the lobby? It's an arms race between them. You can't do anything about the lobby. Good luck. If you start talking about the lobby, you're going to get a primary candidate against you.
That's really why I think government is the problem, that it is the common denominator in all of this.
Right.
If there wasn't a government system, what would they take over?
The Fortune 500, you mean? Market.
What would they capture that would force all of us blanket to deal with them?
Where do we see that, right? There's third world countries that have very little government system going on. There's a lot of anarchy and do whatever the hell you want in those countries.
Right, because see, I'm not that kind of anarchist. That's why I kind of say it. Rules, no rulers is very different than chaos. Chaos
Well,
is not the same. That's not even civil. It's not people being civilized. It's not people interacting. That's not the same thing.
Yeah, that's not what I meant, though. I meant
I get what you mean, though, because everybody uses the word that way.
Right. Well, the powerful get control, and they do what they want. Whether the powerful wears the face of the government or the face of Apple, they'll decide what does and doesn't happen.
Well, there's a difference, though, because of no guns. Apple can't force me to pay taxes. The government can force me.
They can raise prices on you, though, and
then I go to Target.
Whether you call it a tax or a price.
And then I go to Target. Then I go to Target or I go to Walmart. There are choices. With government, I don't have a choice to say your service sucks. I'd like another service, or I'd like you to get better.
Right.
They I feel take my money, give me crappy service, and I have to accept it because I was born here and I'm part of a social contract. So I have no choice. But it doesn't mean I'm not going to complain about what I consider an invisible prison, in a sense.
Right.
I vote for who my warden is.
Right. Well, we got consolidation going on, though, too, through this pandemic. All the mom and pops are going under. You're going to have free choice. I mean, Google and Amazon pretty much are. How are they not broken up by antitrust, by the way? I don't even get that.
I don't know.
I'm digressing. Paul,
it's strange. You'd think the government would do that for us.
Right?
That law has been in place since the 50s. Starting
again?
with Reagan, he
Say it
started
again,
a
Paul?
trend of just not enforcing it.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
It's crazy to me. But so
And a trend
military,
that's been kept up for 70 years. I don't think there's a party to blame. It just is.
What's been going on for 70 years? Nobody's to blame?
That. So that was that 50 or
that?
50 years. So Reagan did it in the 70s. I'm saying that's lasted past Democrat and Republican administrations. I don't think that's a Democrat or Republican thing. Presidents just don't enforce that. You know, that is some of the power you have as
which
president.
would almost make you think Fortune 500 companies kind of have some power over the government or something. Like they run it almost. Like the government's really just a label for fooling the American people into thinking they're not the ones actually making the decision, doing this Bengali stuff.
I agree. We
We
got to
blame
break
government
those
instead of
two
that.
up. We got to break those two up.
Yep.
I
So,
just
Buck,
would,
you know,
if there is a breakup, though, I hope we get to keep the corporations and not the government. I want to go with them. I want to go with mom, not dad. All right, Paul. We all agree partially that it's, or I agree partially maybe that is a good concept. I don't know, but what did you have after the? Do we think UBI would shrink the army?
Prison population.
It's got to have impact there. I mean, it's got to. Desperate people make desperate decisions and desperate choices, you know.
For sure.
That's not true.
70%. We send 600,000
That's
people
not
a year
true.
to jail.
That's
No?
not true. No.
Why isn't that true? If I'm desperate, I make desperate.
I don't think. I think
Oh,
crime
is it-
causes poverty, not the other way around. Not that poverty causes crime.
Right. Right.
So it's. I find that just it doesn't hold. I mean, there are millions of poor people around the world that don't engage in the same crime that we see in a lot of our poor areas, and there are other parts of the world that are poor where everybody does not act the same, and there's parts of the world that are poor where there's really bad crime, and there's parts of the world where it's poor and there isn't a lot of bad crime. So it just doesn't relate because you're poor, therefore crime. So I don't. I give people more moral authority in their own lives than to say that just because they're poor they can't help it, they get desperate and go commit crimes. There are people that do that, but I think that's too big of a blanket to put over the poor.
No.
And it's just
it's a valid point, but let me ask you this, because I guess let me what I would say in terms of putting context to it then is there's a cultural aspect, I think, to that. Like take Japan for example. I remember seeing some video they were showing where people were going to Tokyo or somewhere and catching the train, and all these bikes were lined up for the train. None of them had locks on. You don't use locks in Japan on your bike because nobody steals it. I was in Germany. I left my phone in a cab. Lost my mind. That phone was everything. My business, everything else, the work. I was an asshole the whole day. Everybody around me. The people from Germany were saying, "You're going to get that phone back." People in Germany are very honest, and I'm looking at them like, "Really? Like, I'm going to get I don't even know which cab it's in. How the hell am I going to, dude, did I not get that phone back at the end of the day?" Like that would have never happened in America in a million years. So I guess my point is, I agree with you, Keith. It's not simply poverty, but we're a capitalist country that demands you think like a capitalist and you compete. And if we shut you out from the formal economy, data says you will participate in the informal economy as a percentage. Certain people out there with high moral character that no matter how hard you are on them, they'll just never break. But your average Joe is going to find a way to make it. And with mass incarceration, we didn't just all of a sudden explode a bunch of criminals since the 70s till now. Something else is going on that caused us to quadruple our prison population out of nowhere. People didn't just get more devious, I think. And that just doesn't hold water with me either. There's something else that's causing it.
No,
I think there's a little bit of both.
I don't know. I think you're wrong there. I think there is more crime in
There's definitely more
certain
crime.
areas, even though overall crime is going down.
Yeah.
And the prison
but the
population
prison population
explosion has got, you know, the war on drugs, the war on poverty. I mean, every time the government goes to war on something, people go to jail and die.
Right. But
and like in the 70s and 80s when the crack thing hit,
yeah,
it's unfortunate because it gets blamed on just the system, but at the time it was so horrible that those communities begged their politicians to do something.
Right.
Begged those
Strike,
communities.
yeah, for sure.
And so the populations being the politicians being the big brains that they
Yeah.
are, they went and created the draconian crack laws
Yeah.
to end it immediately.
For
and
sure.
now nobody has the cojones to say, I'm removing some crack laws.
Right.
So
Well,
I
talking
get
about
that. But
Yeah.
things like that have increased
Right.
the prison population.
Right. Yeah.
But what about $12,000 a day is going to change that would be the thing. What is it you
Oh, I'm
think
glad
that...
you asked.
Yeah. Well,
Let's discuss it.
Why I'm asking.
well people.
Right. So, 86% of people return to jail. The recidivism rate
Right.
is 86%. We send over 600,000 a year to jail. That includes people who are returning. We spend over 31 grand per person in jail, and that's only going up.
Crazy.
The rate people go back is very different for different crimes. I think that shows a lot of what people are stealing and why they're stealing.
Right.
Wait, say
and
it
some
again.
of the ones,
Say that last part again.
what rate people are going back to jail for specific crimes, I think can give us some insight on why people as a whole are going back. So
Okay.
what I mean by that is, let me make sure I got
Do
the
you have a
stats
study or
right.
something in front of you? You could just
Yes,
read that
I
instead
do.
of...
Yes, I do.
Well, just read us a little bit of that.
Yeah. That's what I'm setting up, and that's why I'm looking this way. That's what I'm doing. All right, so release prisoners with the highest rates of return: robbers, burglars, motor vehicle thieves, gun selling or buying. And what was the last one? Stolen property and larceny. I'm not 100% sure what larceny is. I forgot what that was.
Type of robbery.
So now, if you reflect that to the 3-year rate of coming back of rapists, it's 1.2%. Homicide is 1.2%, and rape is 2.5%. Obviously, those are awful things. But it's very interesting the difference of
They're
coming
such
back to jail.
I get you,
These
but
top
wow.
5 things are all about sales, all about money.
Yeah.
51% of all returns to prison have to do with drugs. In other words, there was some combo with I stole for drugs, I larcens for drugs,
I need
I
money for
yada
drugs.
for drugs.
Right.
And I don't have the exact breakdown of, like the Venn diagram and the circles coming through. But I think you can get my point.
Yeah.
Also, 60% of people important part is this is what they say. Prisoners say they had a very hard time finding a job and therefore shouldn't secure.
I don't have a felony. I'm having a hell of a time finding a job. I even got a college degree.
This is 600 million people a year.
Right.
Our rate back to jail is 86%. I truly believe this could reduce jail repeat offenders.
Yeah.
To have the ability to look for a
How
job and
much?
not go
Do you
right
got
back to jail, to
any
feed
idea?
yourself, to get a roommate. I think all these things could help keep people from going back to jail.
Do you have any idea percentage-wise? I mean, I get it. Is there anything in there that says
Absolutely
we think
not.
it would stop
Nope.
30% of... No? Okay. So, do you think people will stop doing drugs because they got $12,000 extra dollars?
Well,
They're going to keep their spending habits.
But that's a false question. I don't think that's.
Why is that a
I don't
false
think it's-
question?
Because I don't think it's people doing drugs that are the ones getting locked up. It's
I
people.
thought that's what he just said, that most of those have to do with robbery, larceny, having to do with...
It's drug related. I'm not
Drug
quite
related.
sure if that.
I'm a drug addict. I got to steal. There are a lot of people in jail over that. So
Yeah,
I'm
well-
assuming that's what they're talking about.
Or selling drugs.
Selling
Not that you may
drugs.
be doing, but you may be selling them.
Right.
Yeah,
You may be
that's
mixed
right.
in. The location you're stealing things from could be
Right.
involved with drugs. There's a lot of things that could be going on.
You're stealing from a drug dealer?
No.
The United States is 4.4% of the world's population, but we have 22% of the entire world's prisoners. That's a huge disconnect. 22% of the entire world's prisoners.
Right.
We are by far the most incarcerated country
Right. So
of all time.
we're all against the drug war and agree that there are too many people in jail, right? All right. On to you.
Hey, one more time, I'm sorry.
We all agree that there are too many people in jail, and it's probably because of things like the war on drugs.
I agree with you.
I would say almost not 100%,
right.
but
that's why I'm not saying absolute.
Coordinates.
Right. Okay. So that was to what you said, Jabari, that you know you were saying, hey, we're this many people in jail, and I
agree.
We agree that's not good. So I find it a tough one to take because there are no numbers about how many of those people are actually drug addicts, how many people you just know are not going to come off drugs as opposed to use $1,000 a month. I'd want to know that percentage at least before I said yes. Start giving all those people with records $1,000 a month. And I don't see enough people that would either stop doing drugs or stop stealing, because you're also now saying everybody that I stole TVs, headphones, and bicycles from just got $1,000 a month. I feel like there's going to be a lot of people under what you're saying, Paul, that particular group that is going to just continue committing crime, and there's going to be more money and stuff in their neighborhood. And I think there will be a closer correlation to ODs after this money comes out. I am betting, I don't know, but I would bet money, since we don't have percentages, you know, my guess is that they're going to steal money from family members and OD more, would be my guess.
You're so cynical.
Cynical. Realist.
Well, I think when I hear you talk sometimes,
I'm sorry. And when you said the percentages of murderers returning is lower, I
Crazy
hope
law.
so.
That was weird.
I hope so. Rapists and murderers have a lower recidivism rate than theft, larceny, and those.
When you guys,
I don't think that's a meaningful distinction. Is my point. Right. You were trying to say, "Oh my God, look at this difference." I don't think that's a meaningful distinction.
1.2% compared to 75%. You didn't catch that? You didn't catch that huge change? I mean, that's a big deal. I think that is really interesting. That's such a massive change. Shows you money is a really big influencer.
If I go to jail for murder, I'm guessing most of us don't get out. And when we do, we're like 70, 80. So I think comparing the two categories as a percentage are two apples and oranges comparisons. So I don't believe that huge difference between those two numbers actually says anything or says what you think of us.
Well, I'd like to mention that, no, 90% of murderers get out. Most murderers get out. The vast majority of murderers. Let me get you an exact percent.
But murderers aren't the reason we're bursting at the seams, though.
Okay, Paul, I concede the point. My fault. It was an assumption. We'll move on. Yeah.
Well, but real quick, I could just say, if you guys get a chance, check out a documentary called 13th. It focuses on mass incarceration. And in their case, they're looking at racial disparities around. It's called 13th.
13th.
Really good on Netflix.
The amendment?
There's a lot behind it in terms of certain communities that are targeted, the economics that they argue as to why certain populations become vulnerable to, the drug trade, and then go in, and kind of how screwed you are at that point when you come out, to Paul's point, because now you're a felon. You're in worse shape than you were when you went in, typically, and it's real easy to go right back into the drug trade again, and now you're looking at a real hard time of not coming out again. There's a big difference between that population, though, 80s, like you talked about with crack, and what we're talking about today with the opioid epidemic, which, by the way, is now a health crisis, not a criminal issue, since it's a different population, I would argue, than before, when it was also a health issue. but it was
Right.
everybody just treated as criminals.
Nobody's disagreeing with that stuff. What I'm
Yeah,
saying
but
is I don't see how UBI makes that better.
well, because I
What
think
does that do to keep people
yeah,
from being the same person they
yeah,
were when they went in? It's the
right,
rehabilitation, the
right,
change they make in their head that makes
right,
them not come back and be different.
yeah.
Not $12,000. I just don't think
I
$12,000
hear
is
ya.
the line between going back or not.
Right.
That's what I'm arguing.
I would only say that I won't take a hard line on it only because if I don't feel like the people that are swelling the prisons right now are the drug addicts as much as they are the drug dealers. So in other words, those guys coming out
Right.
aren't still addicted to crack. They probably really never were, actually. They were trying to make money on it. To your point, is 12 grand going to help make a living for them? And, put it this way, we won't raise minimum wage. And so working at Burger King is not going to put a roof over your head, but 12 grand and working at Burger King might keep a roof over your head to try to figure things out for a little while. Because you don't want to go back to selling crack, and is that going to happen in large numbers? I don't know.
I don't know. The drug abuse and the drug addiction within the prisons is huge. So I get that you're saying maybe a lot of these guys went in and they didn't do drugs, but we're talking about people who just spent time in jail, and those rates are huge.
Right.
The World Bank has had 30 different cases of UBI tested that they were involved in.
Yeah.
88% said that the extra money actually decreased alcohol rates and tobacco rates. And that only 2 out of the 30 studies did it ever increase by people's spending of tobacco and alcohol, and it was only by 1%. So I think the extra money will be spent appropriately. The World Bank showed 30 cases, and that people just doubled down on those things they needed: food, rent, those kind of things.
Were those 30 cases all ex-prisoners and felons? Because that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just throw that in there. Regular people found, as opposed to people who just came out of prison. It's not, I mean, I get that you're saying there are 30 studies out there that show people in different places have said positive effects. But I don't think it'll help the prisoners the way you're saying. Although I would like to see those studies, and I'll, put them up or let me see them, and I'll check them out. And I wouldn't be surprised if you can figure out why in each of those. Why? Because many of these cases, or I'm betting they did a Sweden, I'm betting they did the one in Denmark, they did the one in Germany, is probably because there's only about 30 experiments right now, right? I mean, I'm assuming they're all the current.
I'll post it. You can go through all the info.
All right.
Well, this is such a valid point, though, to me, Keith, because it depends. There's so many factors that go into whether, something like this individually is a success for somebody or a failure. By the time this gets implemented, should it get implemented, would it still be 1,000 at that point, right? Like, so many things will change. The bottom line is it a dollar amount, to your point, that meets enough of a need for that person to prevent them from risking their freedom again, or putting together something sustainable again.
And I don't think the hard number of who it will save and who it wasn't isn't important. I think for someone coming out of jail, it has to start here. You have to have startup money. You have to have something to succeed. You can't just be left with nothing and expect to not steal or not do drugs or not do anything. This is where you start. And maybe you fail more than once. Maybe you fail several times as you fall again. But it has to start somewhere. You can't build pots without clay. You can't plant seeds, grow crops without seeds. You need this beginning. And coming out of jail with a felon, the only choice you have, I think, to get such stability is help. I just don't see people coming out of jail and landing the great job, landing the ability not to be stressed, landing the ability not to want to do drugs because you have all these issues. I think it has to start here. Whether it's successful, we're going to have to see. And why I bring this up is because I don't have a specific amount, but I think it still starts here. I think that 600,000 a year that we just can't write off, and we have to try.
Right.
That's a pretty amazingly huge experiment that you have no idea if it'll work or even how much it'll work to just enact on all of us because
Yeah.
you think that's where it should start. That is not a reason to
Oh,
change
100%.
this
Well,
giant.
100%. It should be the
It
majority
is
of
in
people
your
that vote
head.
that
I
in.
get that.
Yeah.
But doesn't that dollar
It's
just
definitely a
end up,
majority vote.
and doesn't the dollar just end up back where with the Fortune 500 anyway? I mean, even in that
Eventually,
spirit,
yeah.
you just
So might as well get our turn a couple times.
Yeah, that's all I'm thinking. Were you going to bring up
and then all
automation?
the prices go. How
What's
long
that?
do you? There will be immediate benefits, like most cash giveaways. Of course, there's an initial benefit. It's why they do it, and it's why it passes. But you can't take away the inflation or the rising prices that are going to come from it in the future. And I wonder if you realize how much in the future we're going to have to pay anyways for that money now. It's not going to be a net gain. We will pay for it one way or another in the future.
Didn't just explode inflation. If what you're saying is
Start it
true,
again.
in the
I'm
last
sorry.
15
You
years,
keep starting
inflation
right
just
in at the
took
end of
off
my
so
sentence,
far.
so I don't hear the
Oh, I'm
beginning.
sorry.
Yeah, I keep missing the beginning of what you're saying. That's why I keep saying start over. Go ahead.
Right.
If that's true, then how come all this quantitative easing for the last 15 years didn't skyrocket inflation? Inflation hasn't gone off the roof, and we have expanded the currency just insanely. We've done it. That's what you were pointing out earlier.
It has.
And,
it has.
Well, let me ask you this.
It has.
What do you mean? What do you mean inflation? What's inflation at? How is it
an increase of the money supply?
What?
An increase in the money supply or an increase in the available in-kind money to businesses and citizens.
But where's your proof? The inflation has not gone up steadily in the last 2 decades compared to the last 5 decades. Inflation's gone up around 2 to 3% every single decade for the last 70 years. For you now to take this one chunk or this other chunk and say inflation is affecting it, I want to know why. Why do you say inflation is affecting it when we had 2 major crashes? We just poured tons of money in, and inflation didn't take off.
Because they're lying to you about the inflation rate, and that's why the prices of everything keep going up. Your milk, your cheese, all prices are going up. That is a result of the increase of the supply of money. The government is not going to come out and tell us, hey, you know that $1 trillion we put in? Gonna be 4% next year, and it's a compounded interest over and over. It just keeps getting worse. The interest that they're putting in is also part of like what Jabari said earlier. Why are they just holding the money? Is because they know how bad it'll be if they do that. Also, they change. Once it gets bad, they change the basket. They have a basket of goods that they compare prices from year to year and decade to decade. And that basket changes. When one element of the basket shoots, they throw that one out and they get different things to put in the basket. It used to be things like food and gas and things that really reflect. But if you now go look at the basket they use to measure inflation and have for a while now, they do things like they see how much money the entertainment business has made. They choose businesses that don't reflect inflation.
Well, Keith, let me ask you this then, to try to challenge, because I get the economical principles you're laying out there and what drives inflation and the impact that can have. I want to challenge it in terms of it being such a rigid given, and impact. And let me ask you this, like one of the things that I struggle with when it comes to investing in certain communities, using government dollars, private sector dollars, to me, I don't care if it's Fortune 500 government, they're the same. They're my dollars, they're just ending up at the Fortune 500. After World War II, and you look at the GI Bill, which, when you analyze the impact and the outcome of those policies at that time, it largely built our middle class, you could argue, more so than it increased homeownership more than anything else at the time, because of what GIs could do and the breaks they were getting, and those were, incentives they were getting from the government. Education was covered for them at that time, in higher education, and they were able, it built our middle class in a way that I don't know that you can point to anything else at that time. And so to me, again, I guess I get way too vague and too general, because when I hear about programs like UBI or tax cuts, or I'm going to pay for your education, or I'm going to give you a GI Bill, to me, where you and I were similar in some of the things you were saying earlier, was I don't care what form it's coming in. You know, whether it was the GI Bill, or now you want to call it UBI and administer it in this way. The bottom line is you're taking the collective of our resources and giving it back to, you know, individuals to support them in a way that gives them a competitive shot in a capitalist system, as opposed to like now, where I hear you, you want to be taxing the way we are, but damn, it's us getting taxed, not the Fortune 500, by the way. And they're concentrating our wealth. Like, they've rigged the game. And I look at UBI as a way, as kind of a new version of a GI Bill to try to shake that up a little bit. Will it be messy? Will it be bumpy? Will it project the way it does right out the door? You know, no. But to say we can't afford to give out $1,000 to each person when I see how much money's sitting at the Fortune 500, it's a hard pill for me to swallow. And if it's got to sit somewhere, let it sit with us, to your point. Even if it gets routed to the government, which I know makes your hair stand up, but at least it gets to us before we then spend it back with the Fortune 500 again. Just got to route it through us in some form or fashion. But I mean, why didn't that happen with the GI Bill? If it has to happen that way, inflation has to spike, then, you know, why did the GI Bill work? You know, like, there's got to be a way to do it.
The GI, right?
You know,
right? The success of the soldiers who came back from World War II and their use of the GI Bill is a very specific, skilled group. These guys just went off and were taught all kinds of stuff. They were given training. They come back. They have discipline. They have drive. They are workhorses. Yeah, they teach soldiers to do that. But no, wait. I know there are Gomer Piles, but think about the majority of those soldiers are much more apt to come back and go to work and go to their job every day on time, polite, precision. Does that make sense? So
it does.
As a group, we're a unique group at a unique time. And on top of it, we had just ended the war. Everybody else was destroyed, so our economy took off. So it's just a place in time where and also, people forget this part, government spending had just dropped incredibly after the war. We had just spent every dollar, every resource we had. They come back, and what economists were saying at the time is that we are going to have one of the greatest unemployment problems we've ever had, because all these soldiers are going to come home from the war and they won't have nothing. So even the economists were wrong at that point, that these guys came home, and it's one of the reasons they gave them the GI Bills, because they didn't think they could come home and just go to work. But these guys did, and that's a specific group, a specific time, and I don't think it will translate over the population the same way the GI Bill was successful. If that makes sense.
I hear you. Then let me ask, but let me
keep in mind that was white soldiers coming back.
Well, I know.
Really pushed out of that system. So I think it was a good system, but it wasn't just hardworking people. It was hardworking white people that got the system.
But here's the thing.
What was the point of that, though? I don't get it. What's that got to do with it?
I think
or did you just want to bring that up?
Well, because not everybody got the benefit of the GI Bill, and so now we're seeing the effects of that still in those communities.
Right. So why doesn't that support what I just said?
Because accumulated wealth really helps, and UBI would help replace accumulated wealth that many other people got in an unfair competition.
We've never tried that experiment on the population that Paul's talking about.
Right.
We never tried it on them to say it won't work. And this is maybe us trying it to see if it'll work.
Okay. Do you get that I'm saying it's two different groups of people? Even the people that didn't get it from the GI Bill, if they had gotten it, are a different set of skilled people. So the same point holds. Those soldiers, white, black, whatever, were a different class of person with a different set of skills, and in particular skills that work really well with going and doing an industrial job.
Right.
That's the difference I'm saying, not the color. I get the color thing, but why would you think that works on just the general person, and in particular on prisoners?
But here's the thing.
It's not going to have the same effect because they're different people.
Well, I mean, that's you're saying that with a lot of certainty, though, because here's the thing: like, I'm not so
I
sure that
feel
what they,
certain that there's a difference between the
I
1950 World War II soldier and
right,
somebody coming out
but,
of prison in
right,
2020.
no, no,
I'm
no.
okay with that assumption.
I agree with that. That's two extremes. I wasn't thinking the prison population necessarily. I was thinking more your average
Your
Joes.
average Joe. Okay. All right.
Doing
Yeah.
well. But here's the thing. So, like, if you look at social mobility around the world, you know, the ability to move from one social class to another. There's one thing I wanted to look up before the show, just because it's to me a very impactful statistic. We rank number 27 out of industrialized countries, which is pretty bad. The 26 other countries in front of us
For what?
have more social
What
mobility.
are we measuring?
Words,
Oh, more social mobility, right?
yeah, in other words, the ability to move from one social class to another.
Right.
When you look at those countries that are ahead of us, it's countries that cover the education for their population. Some cases they have their version of basic housing. They cover healthcare for their population. You know, they cover basic needs. We're talking about UBI, which is a way to do that. They're doing it in different ways. They're not doing UBI, but that's again where I start to get frustrated with we get hung up on the mechanics of it, and whether it's a tax credit or whether it's a this or that. But the bottom line is you are helping support your population and not have to worry about certain basics, which then makes it easier for them to do other things that empower them to then and you should, like this as a libertarian though, Keith, to empower themselves to then, you know, start a business, learn a skill, finish school, not have a handout, you know, and then move into a social class where now they really don't need, you know, the support that they did previously, you know, as opposed to what I feel like we're doing now. But we mask it well because we love to talk about how capitalist we are and never say we're socialists when we do it right out in front of everybody with a stimulus that really just goes to the Fortune 500, sprinkles on a few of us on the way. But, you know, they've got better social mobility than we do. And I feel like we keep the boots on the neck and make it difficult for people that are already in a not easy or they're in a difficult position as it is. And, you know, our answer to that is, well, we're not going to invest in you. We'll invest in the Fortune 500. We'll make sure they get a bailout and they have dollars when times get tough. You just got to figure it out. And it leaves the country in a place where you can play the numbers on that one. Like we're betting, you know, I know where to put my bet on how the outcome of that's going to be. And I hear you. There's got to be ways to do it in which you're not, I don't know, and not certainties, but to keep coming back to the place where we just don't invest in our people, but we'll invest in our corporations that's not a good long game, in my opinion. And we're seeing it, I think, in that statistic. Why are we 27? And yeah, some of it's cultural, some of it's our education. The bottom line is, however you want to slice it, we're not making it easy for people to move up, you know, unless you already got some, you know, some game to come with, you know, I feel like. You know, so whatever inflation they're having in those countries, they're dealing with it somehow, you know, to have better mobility than we got. There's got to be a happy
I think mobility is a different function, though, than inflation. I'm sure it affects it on the margins, but mobility, I think, is other factors. Although you're right, mobility through our economic system has gotten worse, but I think that's more of a hollowing out of some of the middle steps as opposed to the Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah.
And as far as like with UBI, you're talking about the lowest 20%, basically, right? If you look at the,
I don't even know.
I think it's basically the bottom 20%.
Every single person gets it, but the benefits would definitely be the lower 50% of America.
Right. That
probably
bottom,
60%.
Right. That bottom 20%, 80% of the people within the bottom 20% at any given time, 80% of them are in the top 2 or 3 brackets by the end of their lifetime. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what these brackets also are doing is just measuring.
There's certain
the mobility from the bottom 20%, 80% of the people in the bottom 20% move up through the other income levels over their lifetime. 80% move out of the bottom
No.
and the bottom 20%.
No,
Just
Look,
wait.
show me
Just
a
wait.
site
Look, you
on
can
that.
just
What
say
are you
no.
talking
Show you
about?
a site. Christ. 20% of the or that 20% is an ever-changing amount of people. Then there's
Right.
more correlation with age
Right.
than there is
So,
with who stays there.
Right.
Most people move up through their lifetime
Right.
and move
So,
up out of there.
yeah.
That mobility through the middle is gone. And just because you add money here doesn't mean that mobility is still there. If those midterm jobs are gone, you get the 12,000, but it's not moving you up anyways. If
Well,
that chain is
yeah.
already broken, so to speak.
Right. Right. Well, but it doesn't hurt.
No, I got you. I'm just
Yeah. Right. It's not
if
silver bullet.
mobility is an argument, I'm pointing out.
Right. I think
I get that.
the idea of
It changes.
theoretic.
The 20% always changes. And that's one of my other questions
Right.
is if we give everybody that's in that bottom 20% $12,000, are we going to leave the bottom now on the rest of our charts empty so that we can say we have no more poor? Or does the bottom 20% stay the bottom 20% and they're still the bottom 20%?
Mm-hmm.
Are still our poor and then still continue to qualify. That's why I think going forward, this is just going to get bigger. There would be demands for more and more. You're not moving people out of the bottom 20%. You're just changing where the 20% starts.
Yeah,
I think.
But I agree with you. But that matters, right? Like, go to Canada. They've got social classes there, but you will not see the kind of poverty there that you see here, because they're going to make sure that their safety net isn't all the way in the damn sewer. You know, it's at least above the sidewalk. You know, ours.
Right.
Yeah.
They pay a lot of
So
taxes
I feel like
for
people
that.
see that
Also,
what's that?
I would love to see some of these countries that
Yeah.
pull off social net programs, paying for everything the way that we do. Part of the reason places like Canada can afford more social net welfare than we can.
Yeah.
They're not running the crazy military we are.
Yeah, that's what I'm
So
saying.
if
We agree.
I
so
totally
agree.
get that. But that
We are
doesn't
in
mean
violent agreement on
that doesn't mean it's working. It just means they don't have a military.
No, it means it's working for them, though.
Not if they are paying higher taxes in the first place.
Right.
Even in Sweden, where people talk about this, they pay 60%. People aren't getting extra because we all pooled together like that and used a tax system. It's just you pay in, we get a cut, and we pass some back out to you.
I don't think they have the one right now. 1% have almost 40% of our wealth. They've got rich in Canada, but they don't have 40% of their wealth distributed amongst 1% of the population.
A disparity like that isn't proof. It doesn't say to me because there's a person with $1 in your society and there's one with $1 billion in your society. Therefore, you have inequality. Therefore, there must be a problem.
Right, but that's not the analogy I would use, because that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if you have X dollars in your economy, and over the course of 5 years or 10 or whatever, you start concentrating that and sucking it into a smaller and smaller percentage of your population, that population obviously is going to be fine. But the rest of the population is going to hurt when those dollars are pulled out of circulation. And you were making that argument a while back about it, the concentration of that wealth, or the dollars going to, the government and the Fortune 500, and then them sitting on it for economical reasons. But
if they sit on it, that's good for the rest of us.
Well, now, here's the thing.
The inflation doesn't hit the system.
Yeah.
The point of the dollar is how much value it has and how much purchasing power it has. If somebody puts their money in their mattress or a big company sits on it, the value of the dollar in your pocket increases.
So Keith, I say a lot of stupid things.
Not at all. Not at all, man. There's no stupid stuff.
I don't even like doing this.
There are no stupid comments on Cerebral Threads. Face it.
But I pride myself usually on having opinions that are based in data, or based in something I know. But I'm going to go with Paul on this one when it comes to the inflation. And I feel like I know the principles that you're laying out, but I feel like you're going a little too rigid with them and a little too much certainty, because I feel like everything from our crash in 2008 to whenever the hell we bust, we have a way of not hitting the reset button, but hitting it for the companies that go under and whatnot. Like, we have a way of just absorbing it, saying, fuck it, like whatever. And as a people and as an economy, powering through it in a way where, yeah, inflation hurts, but there's rare instances in our history, with the exception of like the 70s and gas prices and crap, where it was so bad that it outweighed, you know, the financial move that we were making, you know. So I don't know, you know, because I don't have any data to back that up, other than, you know, I can't point to a time in history outside the 70s when inflation was such the boogeyman that, you know, we just couldn't invest in our country. Because to me, it's all the same dollars, whether the government's
spending. Well, the Great Depression, I mean, it's
okay.
The Great Depression in the early 1913, Federal Reserve Bank is created. They allow fractional reserve banking in even wildcat banks, so that they begin to expand the money supply, which goes to Wall Street, creating the Roaring '20s. Okay,
so let me ask you a question, though.
And then the market crash, when all of that money went into the system. We were still tied to things like gold then. Right. So what was happening to the dollar, the inflation showed, causing the bank runs, causing the initial part of the Great Depression.
For sure. But let's say following that then. So reserve banking is the reason people can't get a job?
It's specifically fractional reserve banking.
But that's the reason.
Do you know why they used to call them wildcat banks?
No.
The banks used to fight to not let you, like, do you remember Beverly Hillbillies? The way that banker used to always beg him to put his money in the bank? That used to be banking. You had to get him to give you the money. They used to have wildcat banks that they would set it up to where you're in our banking system, but the only bank you can actually withdraw money is this address. And they called them wildcat banks because they would put the depositor's money in a bank in the middle of the forest, in the middle of the wilderness, where you had to fight wildcats to even get near it, to try to get you to not be able to withdraw your money.
Right.
That's the sort of reason that type of banking, and when it was free banking before the Federal Reserve, you could go get your money. Right. So the Federal Reserve, creating the whole fractional reserve system, screwed it up to where banks didn't have to worry about that. And then you got FDIC coming in, guaranteeing it. Sorry, I got off on a tangent.
No, but no. I mean,
I just realized I was about to go off on something that had nothing to do with this.
No, but well, it doesn't connect. Like, is that the reason that if I'm looking for a job, I can't get a job? Or is that the reason I haven't gotten a pay increase in 30 years? Because, like, those are the reasons.
Partially, yeah. I think so. Yeah. I think that one of the ways companies get around inflation is screwing people on wages.
Right. But that's why I feel like there's been a disconnect between the economical principles, you know, that we know, and the pain that we're feeling, the problems that we're having. Because what I feel like I've seen is companies are sitting on their dollars. They're lining them with the bottom line profit. They're taking the taxes to do it. They're cutting costs to do it. They'll increase prices on us to do it. In other words, they don't raise prices because they have to. They're already flush with cash and profit margins.
Well,
they're going to increase prices because they can and pass along, to your point.
Yes,
restriction or, you know, it's, and like when the banks hold on to dollars, for example, I get the economical reason for doing that, but call me cynical and suspicious. It also doesn't hurt to be sitting on cash for your financial reporting at the end of each quarter and the bonuses that CEOs get, you know, like,
or the low interest loans they give to each other to clean up their own books each night. They make money with internal banking. They're not just sitting on it; they're loaning it to each other. They're handing it back and forth.
It's like the economic principles you're laying out as the obstacles and the problems. I acknowledge them. I see they exist, where I'm not convinced is that they would have the one-to-one lockstep pain that I feel like you're saying they would. You know, I feel like, you know, Fortune 500 again is doing what they're doing because they can. You know, they'll change the rules in a minute if they have to. They'll print more money.
Well, I think they can only do that because they're tied into the government completely.
Well,
the government gives them the right to do it, and they use their guns to enforce it.
Yeah, but they own the government is the way I look at it. That's where you and I differ on the
Absolutely. I know. I believe they own the government too. It's why I don't want government. It is a vessel to be taken. It is. So, that is what you go for. Yeah. Corporation. You don't come to my neighborhood and try to convince me.
Right.
You go to whoever's in charge of me.
Exactly. But in the meantime, well, so let me going back to the UBI.
Right.
We lost Paul.
He's back. Here, I think he's got a few more he wants to get through.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Paul.
We'll move on to the next one. I made lots of notes. We can always come back and do it again.
I've been drinking a lot of Rockstar, so.
Yeah.
Because you're a superstar.
All right. Are
you done with that one?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these are, I know what my opinion is, so a lot of it is just to hear your opinions anyways on this. So, the family unit. Starting in the early 80s into Clinton's presidency, he changed a couple of the laws for whether you could collect unemployment if you were married, or not employment, but
welfare,
healthcare for your children and welfare. So it was actually more advantageous to not have the father at home, which I understand they made that. That's one of those classic examples of you try to do something with good at heart and fuck things up.
Right.
What it turned out is that it used to be people who were impoverished married more because just the economics made you stay together, and so be it. But this law had the opposite effect and start pushing fathers not to be on the birth certificate and not to live at home, just to get qualification for this.
Right.
I feel that $1,000 each would actually encourage families to stay together. Now you have 24 grand to do something with. And as your kids get older, they also start to contribute. The average child household is 2.5 people, which we talked about earlier. So that's 30 grand in the average household, I think would accumulate and become more because more people would stay home to save. I think this would make people stay in the family unit more. I think this has a chance of getting people to be roommates more and live together more, which I'm not saying that's what you should do as a society, like, oh, you should get married. But a lot of stats show that two stable parents help a lot to raise a kid. Roommates do better financially just because of splitting bills and stuff. I have I'll post some of the stuff I have, but it's very hard to find a specific how much money you save as a roommate. You know, I can give you guesstimates, but so I think this could actually encourage the family unit and bring the family unit back together by having $1,000 to each person.
Mm-hmm. Why not just
I don't know
eliminate the law that did that?
Yeah, that was messed up. I do know about that because it hit the African American community very hard because disproportionately the folks, you know, percentage wise, you'll see.
And definitely poor people, it hit brutal.
Right. No, for sure. It was
I definitely think we should fix that law. I have no problem with that. But remember, this gave health care to children. So I have no problem removing that law, and as long as we still give health care to children, or start coming up with a UBI to help competitive buying of health care.
Right.
Oh yeah, I agree. The nuclear family has been destroyed in many ways by government policies and attempts at well-meaning programs that end up destroying the family.
We haven't helped.
Whether or not it would do it, I don't know. Again, this is this grand experiment on the
For sure.
population. And so why not just remove the laws instead of continuing to enact things? If you notice, what I keep saying is, how about we just stop doing the things that are causing these things? If we just stop doing these things, then
Yeah.
maybe we don't have to go to a UBI to help them.
Right.
I think it's
No, go
I
ahead,
think
Paul.
it's unfair as a white male to say the system's great and even, and let's cut it off and just pull back a little taxes. I think that's really, really not catching the point. We have a lot
And I
of
think that's
Irish
kind
people
of
that are
weirdly
being pushed there
racist,
for
and I'm
no
not
good.
going to answer it.
I'm sorry.
I said
You
it's
thought you were
weirdly
racist, Paul.
racist, and I think that's a racist comment, and I'm not going to answer it as a white
Then
guy.
don't answer it. If you feel that's
Well, then
racist, that's
rephrase
cool.
it. Rephrase
Well,
it. Just rephrase it without
Absolutely
the
not. I'm
as a
not going
white
to change
guy.
that. I meant exactly what I said. If you don't want to answer it, you don't want to answer it.
You pass the
Okay,
mashed
move
potatoes,
on.
please,
Racist
Paul.
comment.
Mashed
That's
potatoes.
cool.
Good for you.
Move on then.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If this offends you, be offended. But
But so,
absolutely
You're
not.
not
I won't
moving
move
on?
on just because. What?
Okay. Well, I guess
But-
ask Jabari then.
well, look at sign of the times though too with this, guys. That was a law. Was that the '60s, Paul, or '70s? I don't remember. No, that was Clinton. '80s.
Oh yeah, that was Clinton that did that one.
Christ, Clinton.
Yeah. I
Anyway,
unfortunately voted for him.
yeah. One of the things that I remember after this recovery, there was an economical, I don't know, data point that doesn't get talked about a lot when people want to spread sunshine about the economy, is that in that recovery, people came back at a fraction of what they made prior to the recovery.
Which recovery after 2008?
Corporations found how to get lean and mean and lay off people they want to lay off anyway,
In
and did that
2008?
back,
Is that
or hire back at a fraction. So there were a lot of people who we call the working poor, who worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs to make the ends meet they used to be able to make with 1 job. So they're not there for dinner at night.
all right?
Can't cook dinner at night. Got to go to the other job. You know,
Both parents.
this is
working
why I think
now.
again $1,000. You know, now I can quit 2 of those jobs and only work 1 again. You know, and cook dinner again now, and help my kid with my homework. By the way, because if I'm not there to do that, there's I'm sure a lot of data on how that goes. You know, when you're in a
Yeah.
public school and mom and dad aren't helping you at home with the homework, and repeating the cycle. You know,
Did
so
you-
that those are scenarios I can think of that are not small populations in urban areas, especially.
Did you know that only spending like 20 hours a week with your children has the same effects on them by the end of their life as total abandonment?
Wow.
So
No.
if you're both working, your kid goes to school all day, he comes home,
Yeah.
he does homework, you spend 2-3 hours a day with him. By the
Mhm.
end of the week, if you're only spending 20 or less hours with them a week, there are no differences in the outcomes for those kids than people who are abandoned
Right.
or orphaned. It's really sad.
That's crazy. That is crazy.
I
My,
can't cite that, but I promise you it's
Yeah,
a study.
Well, along those lines, my dad, towards the end of his life, got involved with a charity called Voices for Children, which is about impacting policy for children in poverty in the state of Virginia. And they'd lobby, and his job was the data guy, basically. And they looked at education K through 12. If your reading comprehension is not up to par by the 3rd grade, the data shows that for the vast majority, you will continue to lag then for the rest of your career or life, your education.
Right.
So it's so critical, you know, K through 3rd grade, that reading, you know, is somebody's helping you
Yeah.
do that and learn that, and you're up to speed on that. Because if not, you're going to be at educational disadvantage the rest of your life at that point, really. I only bring that up to your
Absolutely.
point because
No.
who's going to help you with that?
It's even worse
That'll be
than
your
that,
parent.
I think. I think it's even worse than that most children's personalities are basically baked in by the time they're 5. You got from 1 till 5 to have the largest impact on who your child is
I know
for
some
the
real
rest of their
assholes.
lives.
You're telling me they were assholes at the age of 5?
No, I'm telling you that their parents were so mean to them, they became assholes
Right.
between the age of 1 or 5.
Right.
But it can be the accidental,
Yeah.
as in, both of us are working.
Right.
He's a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old now, so I put him in daycare, and then he goes to the babysitter. I see
Yeah.
him for a couple hours a night. That child ends up having the same problems in life later as
Makes
somebody
sense,
who
though.
was abandoned or
Makes sense.
orphaned.
Right.
We're finding out that that small amount of time is changing. And so 1 through 5, there's so much more that needs to be going on as for the parents at home to even allow that further learning anyways.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's not just that they're not learning to read well enough.
Sure.
It's
Sure.
like
But if they don't, they're screwed a little bit.
Right.
That's important.
I hear you. I hear
Yeah.
you. Paul and I, our mother didn't learn to read till she was 22.
Wasn't she a teacher?
No,
Oh,
she was like a counselor
okay.
at like a Jane
Gotcha.
Hull House, Jane Addams Hull House in Chicago. She used to work there. But I mean, no, she was daycare.
She was
I don't know. I
22?
guess that's kind of like a teacher, but
I don't know. I just
they're
thought I
so
remembered-
small. You're teaching them not to put their fingers in their nose. So I don't know how much teaching that is. But yeah, she learned to read late in life. So for Paul and I, we weren't read to. There weren't stories and stuff in the first few years.
Right. Wow.
She couldn't.
Wow.
So I understand that effect, but there were other really good things that happened to us in there that I think
Good.
that did help us excel in other areas.
Yep.
So that was a hindrance, but there was a lot of other things that went on that let us overcome that in a sense.
Sure. Absolutely.
Not our mother's fault, by the way. She had crappy parents. And she
That's always
did
reasons
struggle
for that.
and learn to read for us,
Yep.
by the way.
Yep. Good deal.
Anything else, Paul? You got another
I have
one?
more.
All right.
Homelessness.
I don't see how $1,000 a month could help homelessness at all.
I think one of the important parts is that we have 7 times more homes than homelessness. Now, definitely homelessness has a lot more reasons than just money. But once again, I think you can't build a pot without clay. First, you start that direction. And definitely people where it is just money keeping you homeless would have a much better chance of going to Detroit and getting a small home and getting these small things. I think you could create the mobility to help other parts of the country keep their infrastructure and keep things you've already paid for. This could be a really good mobility to help many homeless get on there. Also, many of these homeless have drug addictions. Well, if we make them a valuable commodity in capitalism and we assign them amount of money, I think they have a much better chance of getting health care or a place to live or these things, or people are going to help them. We are assigning the homeless a worth, $1,000 per month. And I think that could really help use some of the better forms of capitalism to pull them out of homelessness. Let them choose what's first. Maybe clothes is more important than a place to stay because they have a place they can sleep on the couch while they get a job. Or maybe it is, I just need to put my kids somewhere and have a babysitter while I find a job. Maybe I'm just a drug addict and I need to be checked in somewhere. Well, now I have $1,000 assigned to you to pay for that care. I think, once again, and remember when I brought up in the beginning, 380 billion, I didn't assign it to taxes because these are the things that help regulate that 380 billion price tag, I think. So would this solve all homelessness? Obviously not. I think 75% is drug related, but a shitload of these are veterans and a shitload of these. Remember, most homeless people only stay homeless for a year. Though that is a success story, and I think people should be proud of that, $1,000 would probably trim that down. $1,000 would let 2 single moms live in the same spot and one person watch while the other person tries to get a job and helps that starter, that fund. I think homeless people who don't have jobs, I think this is a great way to bring them into capitalism. The best way to find out what, the west side of Chicago, Garfield Park has 20,000 people. With $1,000 a month, you're looking at a $20 million stimulus package into a group of people that we may think, oh, they need phones. Maybe they don't get phones. Maybe they get garden equipment. Or maybe we think they need garden equipment and it turns out they needed clothes or this, that, and the other. I think $1,000 lets capitalism finally work for the poor and start helping them choose and us seeing what was really necessary. Once again, back to the comment I started with, how do you create without clay? How do you learn without
seeds?
Tools.
Seeds in a pot.
And yeah, how do you plant without
clay.
seeds?
Right.
So I think homelessness, this could have a huge effect on the homelessness, and this could really help the homelessness move. If we're going to make being homeless illegal, which we've done in a lot of places, we don't let you loiter, we don't let you sleep on the streets, we don't let you hit rock bottom and remain unjailed. And I think I want to change those laws too. Until those laws are changed, until we change a lot of these things, I think the $1,000 helps. Just like it could help us transition to a better health care. It could help us transition to do a lot of things. And that $1,000, I think that seed money could really help the homeless.
I had a comment, unless you do, Keith.
No, go ahead.
I think you did a good job there, in my opinion, of what I have not done a good job of tonight, which is that population is not monolithic, right? Like it depends on who we talk about. Some have mental illness, some have substance abuse issues. In LA, I'm more familiar kind of at least with our local homelessness. But then they talk about it nationally as well because it's a particular problem in Los Angeles right now. And it's a moving target because it's increasing rapidly. Rent in Los Angeles in the last 10 years has gone up 80%. I'm gonna set Keith off on inflation now. That's pushed a lot of people out of their homes. We're still building out here, but we're not building affordable housing to replace it. So what's happening is a lot of folks who've lived there their whole lives are finding themselves hanging on by a thread and then getting foreclosed, getting evicted, and they're out on the streets. Now, they're not going to stay that way because they don't have a substance abuse issue. They don't have mental health issues. They were just trying to hang on till the very last point. And so now they got to figure it out. And so a lot of times that means you have to leave Los Angeles, you know, and they'll go to Las Vegas, they'll go to Phoenix, go somewhere else, you know, but, you know, you've got family here though, they want to stick around. Now they're crowded into houses, there's a lot of that stuff going on, but dude, I mean, you've never seen anything like Skid Row out here. Like it's, you know, you've seen places like that, places, every city's got some, but like it's huge out here. And it's pretty much some everywhere. We have 60,000 homeless people in Los Angeles. That's Champaign, you know?
Yeah.
And that's a moving target because that's a phenomenon, like I said, 80% the last 10 years. Like that's a problem that's increasing. And we're not doing a good job of trying to fix it. You got different folks that are battling with city council and whatnot, but developers are arguing and landlords don't want rent control. They've got some of that out here. They have any of that in Chicago? It's no such thing, right? Or is there? Rent control? Yeah, no, I moved out here. I'm like, what?
No,
rent
control, not as much. Not like California, no.
Oh, okay.
California is king for the rent control.
Yeah,
well, that's exactly what I was going to bring up. Is 12,000 isn't getting any LA or San Francisco homeless into a home unless they start building homes, but they don't because rent control. Yeah.
And, well, and in San Francisco, I lived there for a time too. They don't want high rises at all. Like if you go to San Francisco outside of downtown, you will not see high-rise skyscraper apartment buildings. They just they don't like the architecture. They don't get down like that.
And county to county keeps doing it, and town council to town council keeps doing it. San Francisco doesn't grow up because they're not allowed to. Whether they have control of rent or not, they can't.
They don't want. They want both.
They have no choice but to get.
You got to go sprawl, not tall, and rent control. You got to go tall, not sprawl.
It's a tough one. To tell them, hey, you shouldn't have control over your neighborhood, but I don't like it. I don't like the idea that you can't go up. I don't know. That's a tough one. That's a real tough one.
When I was there, I left because of that. Well, partially because of that, and didn't go back because of that. Because I'm watching what was happening, and rent was insane. And I'm watching people knife fight it out. And what was quiet is kept, the huge Asian population from different countries in San Francisco as well, a large Chinese community. But as that country has opened up their economy, you know, and started to build their wealth, where their rich are also super freaking rich. Like, it's crazy. Aren't you guys communists? Like, what the hell? They're coming over and buying up real estate as investment properties like crazy. So you've got tech, you know, money flowing in and people competing for real estate there. People that own, there's people that bought a townhome or whatever, or you know, a 4-flat 20, 30 years ago, and that thing's worth millions now. You know, like, they're rich just off of one freaking building. It's ridiculous. I'm not saying that's a bad thing for them. It's good for them. But to see the foreign investment coming in like that, I just remember thinking to myself, this isn't even close. Like, the forces that were driving the costs weren't even beginning to slow down. And I was like, I'm out of here. You guys can knife fight this out. I'm going to go back to LA. I'm not going back up there again. I'll be homeless. Shit. This is for UBI, though, to what Keith said earlier about this group and that group.
I got to interrupt you real quick. I'm sorry. Are you hearing a ding? I got some messages.
Sorry, that was my
okay.
fault.
I've gotten a couple messages that we've never gone this long, and so they granted me extra time. And so I was thinking, I think Zoom is counting me down. They just sent me a message saying I get an extra 40 minutes. I didn't know I couldn't do this much, but they just sent me a message saying, "Hey, we're inviting you to continue."
Like
so when I heard the ding, ding, I thought they're counting me down, aren't they? I got 10 seconds. Sorry, go ahead.
All I wanted to say was that I think UBI can help certain groups to varying degrees. To Keith's point, I don't know if it'll help this group or that group as much. This is one group where I feel like it's a bullseye. Like, these folks are in a temporary situation. They could definitely use that help to buy time, to figure it out, or to get one low-paying job, and with that augmented money, be able to afford an apartment somewhere or something that they just can't right now. Because, you know, minimum, you know, people used to work, I guess it's the inflation. Again, Keith's point. People used to work fast food job and could, you know, pay rent off that. You could live off that.
Well, just think about a milkshake. Just think about a milkshake. In the early 1900s, a milkshake cost you a nickel.
I can't hear you anymore.
I'm sorry. I scooted myself away. I armed it out of the way again. It bothers me when it sits here in front of me. What are you doing? Scoot over. Sorry. Before all of this inflation, a milkshake would cost us a nickel. The reason it costs so much now is not because it's better quality, right? I mean, they do everything they can to make producing it as cheap as possible. And that is a reflection of how inflated our dollars are, meaning the value of each dollar buys so much less than it used to. So to understand inflation, you got to look at products that were so cheap in the past and say, what is it about them that, even though that we make them faster and quicker and the ingredients are cheaper, why is it so much more expensive? And economists, or Austrian school economists, and a lot of even Keynesian economists will admit that the inflationary effect of the Federal Reserve and reserve banking has deflated the value of the dollar since the early 1900s about 93 to 96%. So without the inflation, you would also basically have 93 to 96% more buying power than you do right now. Let
me ask you this then, with the banking in mind, and that being the driver, it sounds like. And looking at certain goods where costs for them have gone up, and so then they pass that along or what have you. But I also feel like there's another layer sometimes in business these days, especially. Take Starbucks. It does not cost $6 to make a latte. You know, they can, you know, it's almost like a luxury coffee, if you will. There's a big enough market out there willing to pay it. That's what's driving their price. You know what I mean? Versus direct correlation to inflation. But I wonder how prevalent that is. Like when I hear real estate's gone up 80%. Landlords' prices are not increasing 80%, but the market is such they can get away with it. The demand is there. And that's not always necessarily the bank. And I'm not letting the bank off the hook.
No,
I'm just saying that I think sometimes that's the answer, but sometimes there's also more to the story. You know, there's
sure,
you know,
absolutely. Like in a steel company, the price might go up because an input, an iron mine or something collapses, and now you don't have iron, and you've got companies that want to build cars, and you say, I'm sorry, I don't have as much steel, so they got to bid up the price to get the steel to make the cars because there's an up line. So there's always different factors to the inflation.
Well, because like for now,
Paul was jumping in there.
Housing is such a big one, right? Like that's what causes homelessness.
Right. Oh, homeless. Right.
And I'm just not sure that the crazy prices we're seeing are the result of, you know, bad banking policy necessarily. In this case, I feel like it's another driver in the economy that's pushing that.
Well, hey, let me cover what I feel about the homeless part of that real quick, and then we'll let Paul go on to the next one. I don't believe that it's gonna actually help as many people as you think again, and I get that it doesn't matter. It's a start. You don't even care if it doesn't help anyone. We have to start this trying somewhere sort of thing, right?
I definitely care if it's efficient. I definitely care. But I do accept that there's going to be failures.
Individual failures, not a failure of the program. I get you. I'm sorry. You had just said a few minutes ago, though, that you don't care. You want it to be efficient.
I'm saying that I don't find any importance in it, and that's not true.
Okay. Right. Not as much, I thought, is what I said. Not any. I don't think I said zero. But, okay. Yeah, so I don't think it's going to have the great effect that you're touting. I don't even think it's going to come close. I do understand that, you know, homeless is a thing that shifts, but there is a solid amount of homeless that have other problems that make them not live in homes. They've had homeless experiments where they try to move the homeless into the homes because there are so many empty homes, and they are surprised at how often you can't keep homeless people in the homes. Now, that is not the same group as someone who just lost their job, is having to live in their car for a small while, and then gets back into the workforce. It's a different type of homeless, different groups. But because this is no exclusions, no exceptions, everybody's getting it. So we're going to talk. So I often talk about everybody as a group. The homeless is not going to be as great and uplifting as you think. And 12,000 a year may be a start. But again, all of these I feel are marginal things. Like you got people who are on the edge that it can turn for them. And I think that is a very small group that this helps. And I think these type programs always have groups that you can point to say they helped. But then what is ignored is the problems it causes, the inflation it causes, the other unintended incentives that it causes, just like Clinton's program, which was supposed to be helpful, but it made men run from the household and it made women not invite them in. So again, I think there's a really good possibility that this is going to have unintended consequences like I see in government program one after another. War on poverty, war on crime, war on drugs. This is going to be the war on poverty again.
But
I think the government will screw this up too.
The government. This is individual people. You're just giving money to the people. This isn't the government.
And here's the thing: follow the dollar, right? Like, so let's assume you're right, Keith. And let's assume a lot of dollars go to some homeless people that don't use it to empower themselves and, I don't know, blow it on food, alcohol, or whatever. Where do those dollars end up going? They're spending it in the economy, on goods, on services. As usual, the Fortune 500 will funnel it through small business, medium business, back to them again. You know, and
it gets us back in the prices, I feel, as in everybody gets, like Paul is saying, look at this small community. You're about to give an influx of $30 million to
Right.
this small community.
Right.
Which means everyone's gonna go empty everything. The grocery stores, the hardware stores, everybody is gonna stock up then right off the bat, right?
Well,
That's the whole point of this. Then that means up the line you're gonna have shortages and supply chains, and that'll happen right off the bat. If everybody gets a whole bunch of money, you're gonna have some empty shelves for a little while. And that is the reverse inflation. It's what you were talking about, you liked, is that we will get it first. We will be able to go pay for the current price, but in the future that same product is going to be more expensive because we bought out the supply.
Yeah. Here's what I feel like, and maybe I'm way off on this, but like I feel like if we don't do UBI, for example, that money that's allocated within a budget, the lobby of the Fortune 500 will find a way to just take it and give it directly to them anyway. That money's going to, those bunch of dollars are going to get spent.
Well, aren't they going to use the government to do it?
The Fortune 500 directly, or it goes through the consumers and comes in that way. But it's coming in one way or the other, is what I feel like. But maybe I'm oversimplifying it. Maybe that's not true. Maybe they'll print the money or some shit. I don't know.
No, they won't print.
We're saying certain effects are definitely going to happen when we really should be saying can. Sure, a lot of people getting money, wanting to buy toilet paper, spiked it, and people lost their shit.
Right.
But if you go into grocery stores now, it's on sale and it's real cheap. Why? They bought too much. The ebbs and flows of the market are going to up and down prices, so be it. There's a lot of flexibility in the dollar. And B, you have to judge that inflation towards how much money you're getting. If 60% of the population is getting more money than inflation could even come close to affecting them, then they're doing a lot better, and it's a lot better for society.
That's not how inflation works, though.
I keep coming back.
I'll tell you why. Because since 1920, there's never been more than 7% inflation in any single decade. And that was in the 70s when inflation went nuts. Also, in the last 4 decades, it's never been more than 3%. So if I'm giving...
Do you remember what I said earlier about I don't believe those and that they change it so that they can keep it as low as possible over and over again? Right?
Oh, yeah,
Same answer.
Right. But Keith, I'll challenge that again, though, with like... God darn it. Sorry, guys.
It's okay.
Canada, Germany, Denmark, UK, these places that pick up healthcare costs for their people, education for their people, housing. If you add up all of that, and instead gave it to their people in the form of a check, I'm wondering how much that would be. And maybe it doesn't spike inflation because of the way it's distributed then. It's probably your point, I guess.
Well, Germany will be changing that. They're not going to continue to be as generous. One of the bonuses for like a Japan or a Sweden is the homogeneousness of their culture.
Right.
One of the problems is that then when you take that same format over to America, Britain, where it is much more diverse, the same cookie cutter answer doesn't work. We're not the same. We have so many differences, and we're huge. We're just ginormous. So you just can't say, hey, look, this little program worked in Germany or Sweden. Therefore, it obviously would work in this bigger, more culturally diverse country.
I get that. But here's where I'd say, I'm not going to say that it would work with certainty. But because we've never tried it, like show me where that's failed. Where have we ever made a real investment and it's failed in that way? Whenever we've done it in the GI Bill or, gone big in that way, we've actually succeeded. In most cases, I'm trying to think of a big failure that we've had.
Other than the GI Bill?
Well, I mean, but when else have we gone big?
Paul's got one.
And Social Security instantly took 15 million elderly out of poverty. Instantly.
Yeah, like we never, here's the thing.
Instantly were taken out of poverty and remained out of poverty. Why we don't have a lot of elderly in poverty is single-handedly Social Security. That was an extremely successful program.
Because I remember that.
Right. People got a benefit immediately, like all of these programs. And now Social Security is one of the problems. It's ginormous.
Well,
It's huge. People, there is no relationship to much how
yeah,
much you put in and how much you get out.
right.
It's a completely screwed
I
up
get you. It's
system.
mismanaged as
It's
hell.
it's not a good program. It is
But
exactly what I'm saying. Really,
well,
you're just
but
gonna have UBI arguments
yeah,
20 years from now
right.
when you're trying to catch it up to inflation. People are deciding, hey, you know what? I think this is something that should be part of everybody's life. We need to add this. We need to add that. We
No,
need to increase the amount. I think this program, UBI, will turn into those programs
it could.
in
It
the
could.
future.
But Social Security, if it ended today, Keith, would you say it was a massive failure? I mean, it's kept so many seniors out of
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody's dependent on Social Security, and you don't have people investing in their own future anymore.
but they
No,
weren't
it's
before
just
Social
it's just
Security.
they let go of their whole future and they give it to the government, and then the government spends the money, and now we're all fighting over whether or not people who've been putting it into it their whole life are going to get the full amount back. Maybe we're going to make them stay a little older.
I mean,
What about everybody who's putting
right.
into it that doesn't get money out of it? Because I hear people talk all the time that it's so unfair to how many people pay into it and don't get it out. That's
I
one of
get
the
that.
arguments you hear in immigration. So no, it's not a successful program. Just because people like it doesn't mean it's successful or useful.
Well, but we're ignoring that 50% of seniors were in poverty prior to it. That's not the case now. I get it's mismanaged. I get it's not.
During the Depression, there was lots of people.
Oh, that's true.
Right?
Okay.
There was
Valid.
lots and
Valid.
lots of poor people.
That's
They did a
valid.
lot of stuff during that time to try to help people out, and it worked
Right.
immediately. But it was those things
What
that
the-
also stretched that depression out for 10 years.
That's you.
Says me.
Well,
And
no, I mean,
and most reputable economists too. But Paul, you just say no.
Paul Krugman disagrees with you and is a much better.
Paul
economist
Krugman
than
is a
Paul Krugman.
Keynesian
He has a much
horrible.
better
No,
degree
no, no.
than
Him,
Paul Krugman.
Richard
I
Wolff.
understand that you think you're smarter than that man.
I do.
I think he's knocked a couple home runs.
Paul Krugman is one of the worst economists on the planet. And it's sad that he writes for the New York Times because he's going to be fucking the guy of record for years. And he's wrong over and over. Do you remember his prediction on Trump
no, what was it?
and what would happen to the economy? He was wrong. He was wrong on the stimulus. He was wrong on the housing bubble. He is wrong over.
What do you mean? What do you mean he was wrong about the bubble?
No, the
He
stim-
warned that the bubble was a bad idea. What
the
do you
stimulus was gonna
Yeah,
be-
no, he didn't. You got to go back and listen to Paul Krugman leading up to the 6 months before the bubble
Right.
and the 6 months after, where he tried to pretend that he saw it coming all along. Or Richard Wolff, the Marxist economist that agrees with him too.
Right.
Or who's the third one? I call him the killer Keynesian clowns from outer space. Krugman, Richard Wolff, and Robert Reich.
Right. You know what's funny though? I agreed with you in the crash before like in the beginning.
Yeah.
It was happening, and everybody's trying to figure it out. I remember thinking to
And then I
myself,
talked you out of it.
it.
Then I talked you out of it.
No, because
No, I'm kidding.
maybe you can tell me why it's not the case. I was livid that we were going to bail these companies out. I'm like, no freaking way. You know, you break it, you buy it. You know, you go. If you can't. This is capitalism. That's the way capitalism works. If you suck and you screw up, you go under. Goodbye. We will
agree.
replace you somehow. You know, and hopefully with something better that doesn't screw up like this again. But I mean, the confidence in that either. What changed my mind was the automotive bailout. And I was against it. I remember arguing with my friends who were Republicans at the time. And I was just so livid too. I'm like, how you guys are hypocrites. Like, what, you want to be socialist right now? Like, I thought you were about the free market. You're going to do what? And they started explaining the addition. I remember who I was watching, but they were talking about the supply chain in the automotive industry in the Northeast through Ohio and all that. And we were already super screwed up, you know, on Wall Street in the financial sector. And it was already impacting, obviously, Main Street and everybody. But automotive was hanging on by a thread, you know, at that point. And if they had gone under, it wasn't just the auto, it wasn't just, Ford that was going under, or GM or any of the automotive. It was all of the part suppliers, all of, the little economies around those manufacturing centers, the ripple effect. To your point, talk about ripping off a Band-Aid, though. It would have been like giving us a shotgun wound.
No, I don't think
so.
so.
I hear you on the bounce back.
Oh, I think that's exaggerated.
What's that?
If you were wanting a bailout for the government, would you exaggerate it, or would you give them the story? Would you downplay it, or would you act like everything in the world is going to crash?
No,
you have to give us money. They should have been allowed to fail so better people could have come in and taken over the businesses.
Oh, but let me
Something like that car company is going to stay there. Just the people are gone. The bad actors are gone, and somebody else comes in, and that car company picks right back up.
But now this is where I need your help, because that's what I have a hard time envisioning. I feel like, because at one point, I tend to be a very doomsday kind of guy. And all my friends know that about me. So when this thing was happening, I was like, dude, we're going to be shooting each other over gallons of milk. Like, arm up, this is going to be bad. This is going to look like nothing like the Great Depression. We're never going to recover from this. It's going to be Armageddon out here. Obviously not the case, but I have a hard time believing if we had let the financial markets completely fail and the automotive, that the pain of that bounce back process wouldn't have been, I don't know, just super ugly. I agree that your economical indicators wouldn't have dragged out, right? Because we wouldn't, it's almost like we're doing with the pandemic now. We're just dragging this damn thing out because we're doing everything half-assed kind of, as opposed to just rip off the damn Band-Aid. But poor people always get hurt the worst in our downturns, right? They're the ones that never quite bounce back like people in the upper class do or the middle class do. Sometimes the damage they experience is long lasting. I've got friends now that are conservative and will watch, financial news that would have you believe that was just a blip back in 2008. We can barely remember that damn thing now. And there's people who still haven't recovered businesses, and things will never be the same for a lot of those.
I'm one of them. I lost $200,000 in 1 week. I absolutely get it. I lost $200,000 in 1 week because of the 2008 crash. I totally get it.
So how do we bounce back that? Because the way you describe it makes it sound like we would just, I don't know, I have a hard time believing that it's that easy.
It's happened for over 100 years. If you go back and you look at at the graphs of all of the recessions and depressions we have had,
right?
It's a clean out. Once that cleans out, it is quick. It's fast. Do you know that 9 months? But everything does. Even during the Great Depression, on the initial crash, unemployment went just skyrocketed to 12% or something, 10, 12%, within 6 months. Within another 6 months, it was already down to 6 and was getting close to 5.
Gotcha.
Within 6 months. And then the government stepped in, started doing price controls, tariffs, and it began to slow that recovery down. You can look at the chart. It almost took off. In most recessions and depressions do the same fast V up.
Right.
And you're talking a 6-month realignment period, a year, as opposed to a 10-year sustained depression. Right. So the difference is huge. And then on top of it, within that 10 years, you have really large-scale, major changes to the economy, to the workforce, to how work is done, how insurance is done. And those changes are with us today. So no matter no matter how much pain it would be to take off that Band-Aid, the not taking it off leads to these monumental big changes to our whole society, to where we have the problem of Social Security, or we have a problem of health insurance now being tied to your job. That is something that happened during the Great Depression. And now people complain about it. The tariffs, the wage controls, they initiated all kinds of things during that time that hurt the economy and didn't let it recover.
Right.
I think UBI, minimum wage laws, all of these things do the same thing, just kind of continuously. And then when you double down, when we're already in a bad spot in the economy, it just makes it worse, the recovery. So I think the Band-Aid is what you have to do. And it's like, I think it's like a drug addiction too.
Mm-hmm.
You're not, I mean, you don't take 10 years to get off of cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
You quit cold turkey.
Well, Charlie Sheen. Okay, you're right. Right.
I was gonna see if Paul had anything
I
else.
what you're saying.
Let's see if Paul's got anything else.
Yeah.
On the original subject.
Oh, no, I remembered there was like, I thought you said 10. Didn't you say you had 10 or so things?
Yeah.
I only thought we got through like 7 or 8 of them,
Okay,
so
good.
I was just trying to get through your list.
That's cool. This religion and community. Most people give 2% of their personal income to a church or a community center. I think the best way to empower churches to get involved and the best way to power community centers to get involved is that $1,000. That means in a place like Garfield Park, 30,000 people, that's almost $60,000 that could be donated to communities or religion. I'm not sure if they'll do that, but I am pro-religion. I'm not pro-religion. I'm not specifically into religion. It's not my thing. But I do think religion brings a sense of community. I do think religion can get you all on the same page. I think religion can have a lot of positive effects. But I think this is a good way to filter money to religious organizations and community organizations.
What other, or like the next couple, are they kind of the same thing, that religion, homeless? Do you have a couple other categories that are all, you think that this would give a nice little start, give a helper, and maybe we could just all, talk about them all at once, kind of in a group?
We can try. I think this would definitely help fund religion.
Okay,
I think this would help college funding.
College funding.
When you start getting money at 18 and you're in high school, you can start saving. My parents split up, so when I was 20, I had to get a full-time job and work a full-time job through school. Yes, it did make me tougher, but I have no intention of everyone else walking that really hard path that really sucked. Working 40 hours definitely affected me in my final year of school. At the same time, I'm supposed to write papers. I'm dyslexic. I'm supposed to be spending more time. I could have qualified for more time registering as dyslexic, but I didn't have that more time. I had a 40-hour job starting that sophomore year all the way to the end. So I think that really did affect my studies, and so be it. I'm not upset. I'm very glad in my path. But I don't expect everyone else to have to walk that path. I think it would be really helpful for college students to have $1,000 to help with. And I think it would be really helpful for high school students starting at 18 to start practicing then about pissing away money and making mistakes. One of the most important things about UBI is the ability to fail, the ability to make a mistake. One of the things that people with accumulated wealth have over people who don't is the ability to fail repeatedly. So I think with college funding, you could definitely start saving some money to attack college, go to a community school, shave that off. If we give large schools competition and we fill up smaller schools, which I think is a great trend anyways, we could break some of the bank on universities. I think this actually teaches personal responsibility, not takes it away. They show that people in poverty think different because they don't think a month ahead, 2 months ahead, 3 months ahead, a year ahead, and they only think about rent and they think about food and they think about these things. They dominate their space in their brain, and also the inventions they attack and they spread can just perpetuate what started. It would be better, I say, if they didn't have to be creative to get food and they didn't have to be creative to live, and their creativity got to bigger and better things. Money does buy happiness. $75,000. It's a study by the Washington Post. And there's other studies that come similar. And basically, the number one argument, or at least top three in person-to-person, spouse, and stranger to stranger, all in the top 5 is money. This is a conflict in our society. And I think conflict about not food and conflict about living a place creates unnecessary stress that we can avoid. And if you're thinking ahead and you're getting money month after month, you start to make plans month after month. You start to make plans year to year, because now you and two people creating 24 grand could buy a house. You could leave that apartment. Just decent credit and a steady job with $1,000 and a partner could create 50 to 60 grand into your house. You wouldn't need unemployment. You wouldn't need a minimum wage. I think the minimum wage would have to come up just to compete to get you out of your house. Good. Let it go for workers. I got two more, and then we'll talk whatever you want. Healthcare, it's a great transition to healthcare. It's a great transition to will we get healthcare ready. Remember, the best plan from Cobra is $600 a month. It's a decent plan, but this could get you in that plan. And remind you, if a family of four need a car, they have $4,000 coming in to invest in 1 month. If a family needs to pay a large medical bill, 4 grand ain't bad. I don't think it's the greatest, but all these are starts in the right direction. And it all stays in capitalism. We're giving people money, we're seeing where they go with it, and then we're attacking these situations. I think we could eradicate a lot of rules, a lot of government, a lot of situations by just giving people money and letting them pick their best path. All right, that's all I got. I think all those things accumulated is how we attack that 380 billion without raising taxes, even though my last point, which I think is very important, where is it? Shit, I lost it.
Are we going to talk about automation at all? Or AI? That's big for me on this.
Okay, so automation is the argument everyone makes. I have no problem discussing it if we want to discuss it. It's the argument everyone makes.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the most important argument. I think it is true. I think people that are denying it are not focusing on the right thing. But no, these helpful things to society. Reduce the military. Don't make people go fight and die just for $1,000. Don't make people beg as homeless. Don't make people sit on the corner and not get treatment for mental health. Give people a responsibility. Give people a mark in capitalism. I think the biggest flaw in capitalism, if you don't have anything to offer financially, say you're crippled, say you're homeless, say you're these things, and you don't have money to offer the system, many times capitalism just ignores you. Doesn't mean capitalism is bad. Doesn't mean capitalism is good. I'm saying let's get the most out of capitalism. Let's make capitalism work for us and start giving people money to seed all these projects. Will it not work? I'm sure plenty of people still go back to prison. If this for 10 years as we work that cycle out, I think plenty of people will stay homeless as we work that cycle out. I think plenty of people will stay on drugs as we work that cycle out. But I love the beauty of this system is let's fail over and get better. Let's give every person the chance people with money and power and privilege already have the ability to fuck up bad, and it doesn't matter. And I do think this is a big racial element. I think we live in a society that's easier for whites and blacks, and if you really do want reparations, this is the footprint. This is to see what a reparation do. I would hate to say, oh, we're going to make things equal. Here's 30,000 to every black person and poor person and affected by slavery. And what do we get? A lot of people that don't know how to use money. A lot of people that don't think 3 years, 4 years, 1 year ahead, these things. And a basic income does that. I slowly give it to you. I slowly work these things. I think money management and your brain has to be trained to work money well, and the best way to do that is give money. Matter of fact, name something more addictive than money. I have absolutely no
cocaine.
Belief. No, you take money to buy cocaine, and you still buy food, and you still buy other things. I think money's much more addictive. Hell, I don't think cocaine's even top 3. Sugar's more addictive than caffeine or Coke, and I would say caffeine, but that's not the important part.
You
The
can't
important
be
part is money
addicted
is
to
addictive and people die into it. Billionaires make more. Trillionaires still look for another dime. If money is so awesome but not addictive, why do these people not just quit and wander the goddamn earth? Like, why isn't Elon Musk wandering the earth like Cain? Why isn't he Batman just solving shit? Because
because he's so freaking smart and has so many ideas, he can't just walk around and do nothing. His brain is like this. Brrr, I got ideas, I got ideas, I got ideas. It's not like, I mean, it's not like he does what he does because he's excited about it. If do you truly think everybody's motivation is just money? Who's a billionaire?
My point was, oh, go on.
It was a question.
My point is,
or they're just addicted to it.
These people that are just collecting billions that, oh, they're so brilliant. Why don't we give that same to people who are poor? You don't think they're going to be brilliant and start shit? I'm saying
no. Yeah, exactly. I don't. No. I don't. I don't think there's Elon Musk's hiding in the poor that we just haven't given 12,000 for. I've already said that. No, I don't think that.
Yeah. I disagree.
He is an exception.
I think he is not the exception. I think him, Bezos, and all those other people tried something we wouldn't allow for 40 fucking years.
What do you mean? What do you mean we wouldn't allow for 40 years? Well, I don't get it.
I'm going to explain it. All these people did something where they dominated the supply. Then they owned the shipping back and forth. Then they owned where it goes. They created monopolies, which we didn't allow for 40 to 50 years.
And they failed at things.
The government. No. The government.
Just give me one more minute. They haven't done anything that history had the Rockefellers tried yet. Every rich group family tried to dominate
through the government.
People credit.
Through the government. Through the government is how they got all of that. It's not an addiction to money. They went to the government and they got the monopoly power. Right?
I don't know.
So what's that got to do with capitalism?
We didn't let others do. We didn't let others do it.
That's the part. What do you mean we wouldn't let others do? That's what I keep asking you. What do you mean we wouldn't let others do? Who? Who's we? Who wouldn't we let do it? You're just saying it like that's obvious.
The Supreme Court.
Yeah, well,
and the president.
Wouldn't let.
Well, and I thought you were referring to.
How do you think we broke them up? How was AT&T busted into pieces?
Oh, right, breaking up companies. Wow, okay. I just didn't get. Let me finish. I don't understand what you're talking about.
You have to go to the government to gain these companies. We did not used to let them buy each other. I don't think they're brilliant. I don't think they're coming up with something creative. They're just dominating every aspect.
They couldn't
and creating a monopoly. All rich people want to do that. All powerful people want to do that. We just finally let them. I don't think they're brilliant. I don't think they're creative.
You don't think they're brilliant and creative?
No.
Wow, dude, you don't think Elon Musk is brilliant and creative? Tesla, not brilliant and creative.
I don't think he's more brilliant
Tim Cook.
Millions of people. I don't think he's this person on a pedestal. No.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. Because I don't think they're as proportionate as they give them credit. There is a lot of timing and luck of the avenue they pursued to dominate the way they have.
No. Guys like that it's not luck. It is not luck that puts.
No, I'm not saying that.
It's not a luck. It's not $12,000 that makes a Bezos, that makes a Tim Cook, that makes Apple, that makes Bill Gates. These are exceptional individuals who gathered the resources and created shit for us. That's what they did. All right, whatever. You know, I think you're wrong when you say that poor people can't handle their lives and finances, and this 12,000 allows them to have the brain power to do other things. There are poor people in poor communities across this world that manage to do even bigger things with less.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just
Read a book. Check out a book by an author called The Beautiful Tree. I would just suggest that. It's about schools in particular, and it's about Indian communities that pay for their own schools, people who make so much less than we do. And they still manage to educate their kids. They still manage to make really good cultural choices. It's not just because they're poor and their lives suck that they can't learn money. That's what I'm saying. I mean, that was addressing what Paul said. I
got to throw your argument back at you that
sure,
they're different countries, they're different places, they're different systems those folks are in. There's different bars set here. This is capitalism. We're competitive here, so you have to do more here to tread water than you might in some other place where
you don't have
the average is, a hut or a shanty home, for example.
Right. You're cooking your food with cow dung, and you can't even afford shoes.
Right.
That is less rough than our American poor with air conditioning, shoes, cell phones, microwaves.
Our poor are rich in a lot of
I mean, they have so much. They live in communities where.
I get it. You don't have to tell me. I get it.
I got you.
But my thing is, going to extreme on that is that would help. It's not people in poverty. This would help. There's folks who are getting by. That again are working the 3 jobs, and the extra G a month will allow them to quit 2 of them and now go to school at night to get a degree.
I got you.
You know what I mean? There's that population too. Like,
if I could ignore the inflation, then I could agree with all of the stuff Paul listed. That's why I said go ahead and give me 2 or 3 at a time, because most of your stuff is just saying these are all the ways that I think $1,000 a month will allow people to go and contribute to these places or get more out of these places or get a first time to ever get into this place. Right? Paul, that kind of sums up most of it. Right?
All your sums are pretty odd. I'll sum up my stuff. You sum up your stuff. Like, no.
Okay, sorry to sum up your stuff. It was trying to understand you, to let you know that I understood you. It wasn't like me stealing your fucking wind up to.
And you whiffed again.
What's wrong with you?
No, this gives the ability to fail. This gives you the ability to fuck up and get right back on and
Let's fail. What a great plan. I got that. I wrote that down. Yeah, we all get to fail. That is not a great plan. I got a great plan, man.
Awesome
I'm going to give everybody money so they can all fail. You're just going to, you might as well just set it on fire. What, are you
but
kidding?
A lot of people.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Trying and failing is how you learn. You just written off practice of all sports. What the hell are you talking about?
A lot of.
I failed miserably at wrestling for 3 years. The 4th year, I crushed it.
A lot of our most successful.
Learning is part of it. I'm sorry.
Successful, business people will tell you that they had failures before the big thing popped because they had the resources in order to do that. So I think there is merit in what Paul's saying.
There are books. I get it.
It's not a silver bullet. I mean, look, at the end of the day, the question that this is asking me is I'm trying to convince myself somehow that investing in something won't work. And when I look at countries that have invested in their health care, their education, the things that we could be investing in with this, or that this would invest in, I just haven't seen where that's such a failure. It seems to be actually working the places where they've done it. I'm not saying you take it to an extreme, but that's why you experiment and figure out what's working, what isn't. We need to tweak this, what have you. But the way we're doing it now, which is, again, just shoveling all our money to the Fortune 500 and finding new ways to do it. And getting mad at government for it, which is just the tool of the Fortune 500 to get the money. And it's almost like splitting hairs because I'm mad at government and the Fortune. They're the same thing to me. But I don't know. I just don't see that trying this is we bailed out the frickin' financial markets. My God, this isn't going to break us. Like, we piss money, we just 2.8 million in Bush's cuts. The stimulus, which we pretend we gave to people that went to the Fortune 500 also, we're going to do it again.
Let's also separate. I don't like giving corporations money, right? I don't. I get
That's
that.
where we agree.
But those are subsidies.
Yeah.
Those are subsidies. You gotta. There's.
Same thing to me. I mean.
I know it is, but it shouldn't be. Not taking money from someone is not giving them money. And often when you say these things, and when people on the left say that, they don't make any distinction between not taxing more and giving money.
Right.
It's not the same thing. If
Right.
if I take less of your money,
Right.
that
That helps too.
that's
I get
not
it. I get
that's
it.
not giving you money. Now, if
Right.
I
I get
say,
it.
hey, here's taxpayer money, I think this sector of the economy needs a boost. Here's some money, or a college, here's some money, that's giving money. But not taxing someone
Well,
is not giving them money
well,
unless you feel that they already owe the money and they've taken it in the first place. Then you're just
correct.
taking it back.
Well, here's the thing. Again, where I differentiate is we're talking about people versus corporations. Because I agree with you when we're talking about people. I have a different opinion when we start talking about the Fortune 500. They do owe money. In fact, I'm paying their taxes right now. They didn't even pick up this damn bill, is the way I look at it. In terms of Walmart, it's not covering healthcare for their people. They use my tax dollars to put those employees on Medicare. You know, I'm paying for their healthcare. You know, I wouldn't have to pay taxes if Walmart and Apple paid the taxes that they used to at a certain percentage level. Not those companies, but what we used to tax, the tax rates we used to have back in the day. You know,
They never paid those taxes.
They can afford it.
No,
Well,
they never paid those taxes.
Corporate tax. And I remember we taxed the wealthiest at 90%.
It doesn't matter what it doesn't matter what the percentage was. You have to go look at the receipts per
right
in comparison to the GDP, and that amount doesn't change. Even if you say 70, you say 80, you say 90, the rich figure out how not to pay the tax. And they don't pay it. So if you go and look at the receipts, the only real effective tax rates that bring in the most money are between 22 and 26%.
Right.
The Laffer curve.
I say okay. I mean, because there's nothing I can say when they're the ones that run it, right? Like when I say let's tax them, how? You know what I mean? Like how? They decide what taxes get passed. They're not going to allow politicians to tax them at a higher rate. They'll run those guys out of office.
Well, I don't know how you would believe then that this UBI program run by the government wouldn't be taken by the corporations in some way.
Because we'll spend that money.
What I see happening is nobody giving cash, but then they select 5 banks
to give it
that get the cards that then charge us all fees for using the cards. And then they take the last little bit too at the end of the month, and then a year from now they add in, okay, and if you don't spend it by the end of the year, it doesn't roll over anymore. Now we're going to take the last bit of it. And then 3 years from now, there's somebody else in office and they decide, you know what? We think shoes should be on there too. We're going to add $500. You're just creating a system to where the majority is just going to vote themselves more and more stuff. Not understanding that in the end, the inflation makes us going to make you pay anyways. And the rich, they're not going to pay. They're going to buy gold. They're going to buy silver. They're going to buy art. They're going to buy land. They're going to buy all the things that reflect that future inflated price. The gold will skyrocket. Their art will go up in price. Their land will go up in price to offset the inflation. So even if you get a benefit now, in the future, the rich will still win if you inflate the money supply.
If you don't do anything about it, yes.
Yeah, then you have to do something.
We started subsidizing healthcare, didn't we? With Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act, and costs were already going up insane prior to that. I remember it was like I don't remember what the percentage was, but I remember they were saying it's approaching 70% of GDP. It's becoming a bipartisan issue now because economists are recognizing this is a problem, you know, and so it's slowed the increase of healthcare, but we're still seeing the increase of healthcare. But then why not the same thing in that industry? Why not a crazy spike in inflation with this government intervention that is, you know, allowing people to have coverage now, for example? You know, like, why would that be different? I guess. And
it's not.
Again, I'm not poo-pooing what you're saying.
It's not. I don't think it's different.
That it's, you know, going to be, that inflation is going to come and just have that hit to that extent. To just screw it all up, you know?
That partially, that's what the housing bubble was. They just blew it back up. Printers go burr and they put the money in the banks and now the Wall Street and everyone thinks everything's okay. And Trump comes in with the big, I'm pro-business, so the market takes off, and it's just, this bubble is just bigger and bigger and bigger.
I'm with you on that.
Adding UBI just makes it bigger, is my point. And I know that you think that there will be ways to offset that cost or
I'll
take
give you
it
that.
to make
I'll
it
give
a
you that.
1-for-1. I understand that people think that you can make it a 1-for-1,
Yeah.
so that it won't actually add to the supply of
Right.
money off the bat. But
Here's
I
how I
don't
look
think
at
it'll
it.
stay.
It's like musical chairs with money. Where's the money sitting when the market crashes? If you pull it out, you're in good position. If you still got it in the market, you got to wait till it's over with. If you're Fortune 500 and have it in your reserves, you can ride this out. I'd like the money to be sitting with us when the market crashes in the musical chairs and everybody has to sit down until this thing's over. You know, people have got 6 months.
If I were you,
enrolled the program, they learned a new trade. And now
if I were you, don't hang on to $1 into the crash. You buy as much gold and silver and other hard assets that once the dollar crashes, it takes more dollars to buy them back. So I have $1,300 in gold. The dollar crashes. It goes up to 4,000 gold, just a number. I haven't made any money. It's not like a profit. It's just now it takes that many dollars to buy that same amount of gold. I sell the gold back, and now I can go and buy the more expensive groceries because I've offset the interest by buying hard assets into an inflationary period. And that's how people get rich, not the other ways.
For sure.
Or that's another way that people get rich is just by knowing how to move the money in and out of different forms.
Sure. So I think about this one. Is the last thought that I had around this and going into this. And Paul, I know it's the one everybody leads with, but like,
let's get close to 10.
Automation and AI. I had a friend that was like, dude, you got to see this documentary on AI. He's like, whatever you thought you knew about it, you need to check this out. And I was like, check it out. Because when I first heard about UBI, I'll admit, I was like, sounds like, just expanded welfare. Then when I learned about what automation is doing and what they're projecting with the economy, I was like, oh, now I get it. Like, they need an answer to that problem. They're projecting 50% of our jobs are going to be gone over I don't know what time period. And so they were showing AI in truckers, for example. This is a good example because there was nothing but demand for drivers for the last probably 10 years. Remote driving schools, you name it. We couldn't get enough of them. Now they've got these semis and they're showing the technology. It's freaking insane the progress they've made like in the last 5 years. They took these semis have like 360 radars. They can downshift. They still have a person on them, but that guy does nothing. He just sits there basically. And they drove it to a truck stop and went in to talk to some truck drivers. And they said, you guys are all concerned about the technology that's coming. They're like, oh no, they can't do this. And they're like, actually, they've solved for that now. They're really good at that. It's like, oh, they can't downshift on the mountain. Like, no, actually, they've got algorithm programs now. They do that superbly, actually. Excellent. And one after another, so they take these guys out to the parking lot and get them on the semi. And they're showing them the bells and the whistles and the computer and the technology, whatever. And you can see it in their faces. And some of them just left and went back in. And one of them stayed behind there talking to him. He's like, I've been a truck driver my whole life. He's like, I don't know what else I'll do. Like, I can't do anything else. This is all I've ever known, but he sees the writing on the wall. He's like, these are cheaper, they're reliable, they're safer, they can run 24/7. You guys can't even begin to compete. Like you're not, you're like Kodak film. It's over. That's a whole industry of jobs that are about to be eliminated probably overnight in the next probably 4 or 5 years because of automation. And so then I've got crazy with it, because I'm thinking, okay, we got to solve for that, and even with sales, I see it. They've got Marketo that does emails now, and things that used to be a function of my sales job that they're automating, or whatever. There's computer programs that code themselves, the right computer programs. Like, you don't even need engineers anymore. I remember hearing them saying, I still can't get my mind around this because I don't understand the concept fully, but I remember people in technology saying, eventually we'll just be coders and non-coders. And I'm like, okay, how does that make any sense? Somebody still has to pull up your car at the restaurant. Like, there's still going to be service and other jobs out there. I guess maybe they meant from a wealth standpoint. I don't know. But if you get crazy with it, where AI is to the point where there isn't a job out there that you really need a human being for anymore, and you now have an economy that doesn't need 90% of the labor that it used to in order to produce even more efficient GDP. What the hell? And for a minute, I was thinking this very negatively, right? Well, I'll be out of work. That's going to suck. Then I got crazy with it. I'm like, oh, no, hell no. Wait a minute. I still get a nice big fat check. I don't have to go to work. The economy's still crushing it. I get to travel. I get to, you know what I'll do? I'll just lay around in sheets all day by the pool and feed myself grapes and talk about Plato and shit. I'll just do philosophize. Like, why not? You know? What would that society be like? Now, I don't think we'll see it in our lifetime, but you're going to see major inroads of industries and jobs being eliminated. We're reaching a turning point in technology and just society that I feel like you've never seen before. We always replaced it with something before.
Right.
And we've done a little bit of that, but I think we're reaching a point where literally, like, I mean, what do you need us for? Like, which freaks me out too, because I'm thinking eventually with AI, they'll get to a point like, wait a minute, what are you humans still even doing here? You're the most inefficient thing we got around. And then we're going to have Terminator. You know? But no, but there's legitimate economic.
I don't know. I don't think it's as big of a scare as it's made out to be at all. Not at all.
No?
Microphone.
I don't believe it's as bad.
Yeah. You think we got more time? I mean, eventually we'll be there though, right? I mean, maybe after we're dead. But.
I think about, like, what is it, 70, 80 years ago, 94% of us worked the farms, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now it's 2% of us. That change happened over an amount of time, and people moved to the cities and got new types of jobs, and there were new available jobs.
Yep.
And the wiping out of 90% of the jobs did not cause an incredible displacement of workers all at once. It's not how that happens. It's over time. Same thing with carts to cars, right? It was an overnight. People slowly adjusted, changed their jobs, changed the training, and it went over a period of time. And then right.
I see what you're saying.
Say it again.
I see what you're saying.
Right. So the really rapid changes, I think most of the time, very high percentage of the time, have to do more with bad subsidization by the government or other large groups that speed that up. Well, that it wouldn't take that time. I think there's a difference between the creative destruction of economics and an evolving economy and an evolving system, and
that makes sense, though.
And decree, and just stating it, and that's what happens now a lot of times with these changes in our industrial systems, is that it's voted on. Here's the change. Now we all have to shift, and then you have this like chop. All these jobs are gone. That is bad, but that is not how it works for the most part in a system of economics or a market that is not that rapid. Oh my God, now we're all gone. And
no, that makes sense.
Even if animation took all of our jobs away, only one or two things would happen. If all the jobs are gone, okay, it all comes to a stop, because if we don't have jobs, we can't pay for the products that these awesome machines are kicking out for us. Or they're making life so easy, we don't need jobs. I mean, it's either one or the other. It can't be like, oh no, nobody has a job and the machines just keep pumping out sneakers and cars. I mean, that's not a realistic view of it. So there is going to be change. There is going to be destruction of some jobs in areas and movement to others. But but most of the time in a free market, you're gonna have a gradual, like the truckers saying, I see it on the horizon. There are some super duper some amazing things that have happened in technology that have burst and didn't have as much controls on it. And I think the fact that they didn't have those controls is why they took off so much. But that's because our government didn't understand it. The politicians didn't get the internet, or I think they would have been in to stop a lot like they are now earlier. They only 5 years ago, they were calling it the inner tubes. They were, I mean, it's just, it doesn't work quite that way. And I don't think animation is taking away all the jobs. Plus, how many jobs do they create? We got rid of horse carts, so we got rid of shoveling shit. That's a good job we got rid of. And now you're in a factory, taking out the garbage or punching something. It's also a better job. And the quality of life. If I can only get a part-time job but everything in my life is increased in quality and value,
Right.
like has happened to many of the poor in this country, whereas
Right.
your wages haven't gone up,
Exactly.
but you got a lot of stuff nobody's ever had ever in the history of the planet. You are still richer than anyone's ever been on the planet.
Well, but we've got more homeless in LA than we've ever had before, for example. It's not always nice and neat. But I hear what you're saying, because I mischaracterized it. I didn't mean to imply that I felt like it would happen all at once and overnight.
No,
but industry like trucking, for example, could get hit hard, and it will happen over a time frame that, maybe people should be prepared, but we're not re-job training those guys for the new economy like we should be.
Unless somebody pushes to pass a law that you have 4 years to make this transition, or you have 6 years to do this, or you have 3 years to get this done, then it does happen that way.
But the industry's not going to let them do that. You know what I mean? But take for example, self-checkout. Like, we have the technology right now to wipe out all cashiers, but we're not doing it. Not because we can't, not because it's not cheaper. There's other political forces and reasons, right? Like, they give you the dirty look when you go through the cashier. But when I heard about this, I was like, dude, I'm doing self-checkout every day. I want to get to my laying around in grapes and sheets. We need to hurry up this process. But I'm joking. But my point was that, it's an inevitable technology advancement that, to your point, will slow it down sometimes for certain reasons. I think other industries like trucking, they'll have to fight the trucking unions, which will probably what slows it quite a bit, but it's inevitable. Like, we're not going to have truck drivers at some point. I don't know when that is. And that's going to repeat itself in other industries over the course of maybe, like I said, after we're not even here anymore. But the point is, you got an economy and technology that you just don't need labor the way you used to. And you're right. Historically, we were able to transition that to other things. We weren't doing hard labor anymore. Now we're pushing paper in the cities, but now we're not manufacturing stuff anymore. Over to that, it became services. But I feel like we're doing these iterations where through each iteration, you just need less and less people to do them. And that creates some interesting social and economical challenges.
Well, if that was true, we wouldn't keep filling the roles of the workers. I mean, if we just keep losing jobs and less people get to work, then why do we still make jobs, create jobs, and keep lowering the unemployment rate over and over again? Wouldn't it just be ratcheting up at the same speed as all these technologies?
Right.
I just think it's a false assumption that technology, animation, AI equals less jobs, as opposed to different jobs. Sometimes it creates more jobs. So you can't just measure animation. Not animation. You know what I'm saying.
I know
the thing.
Yeah. I just feel like
that was my Biden.
Corporate consolidation all the time. Mom and pops are going by the wayside every day. We'll reach a point sometimes where there's just, there won't be anything other than big box stores and Amazon and Google eventually. There'll be 5 corporations that are branched out across industries that do everything. There'll be 10 families that own everything, which I told them if that happens, then things get real simple. That'll be the easiest revolution ever. You only got to go hit 2 houses or 10 houses with the people and the pitchforks. Done. We'll do that tonight. But, I just feel like we're moving more and more towards that consolidation. And Amazon isn't going to have to always keep hiring. Talk about getting efficient, man. They run a warehouse with less people than they used to probably in the 80s, with what they do there. But your point's taken. Doesn't mean that it would be across the board, no ways. I don't know. It still worries me.
And quality of life, if quality of life is going up because the products that these machines are kicking out are awesome.
Well, like I said, I was.
Do you have anything to say on animation? You said you didn't want to. You didn't bring it up, and since didn't know if you really wanted to jump in on it
Yeah,
or
no,
not.
I mean, I 100% believe, but I mean, you come from a supply side economics. I come from.
It's called supply and demand, by the way. You always say that you come from the supply side, but just so you know, in economics, it's called supply and demand. There's two
Yeah.
sides of it, and I
Sure.
don't take just one side.
I say supply side because that's all you focus on. I
Right.
think you
Really?
focus
The
more on
demand?
side.
Like
I
the
100%
demand
get
for new
the
jobs, the demand. You don't see any of that?
100% get that.
Okay. I'm sorry. You go right ahead. I am just supply side.
Yes.
All right. Sorry. Are you done?
Yeah.
Did I interrupt you too much? Sorry. You can finish if you want. I didn't.
I just what I was saying was you and me have discussed this a lot. I have no interest in discussing supply side to demand side economics. Enjoy.
Supply and demand. Supply and demand. By the way, it's an
Right.
and. It's two parts of a cedar solder. It's not supply
You ignore
or
the
demand.
side. That's why I constantly say supply side. Your economics focuses on supply. I'm glad you understand
true.
the balance.
Not
but
true.
You always focus on supply side, and that's why I say supply side. It's a shame it bugs you. I'll continue to call you supply side economics because that's what you
It'll come
focus
out
on.
of.
Just because it bothers me. Okay. That's not very nice.
With that money they buy,
You guys, this show needs to blow up. You guys need to be national.
You never mention that. You always mention supply side. That's why I say supply side. That's why I'll continue to say supply side.
Right.
And in automation,
Right.
yes, I
You're
think for a
wrong.
while when automation was coming in small jumps,
Yeah.
I think it was fair to expect people to move to other jobs.
Yeah.
But they showed that when miners quit and they took mining from them, the retraining failed miserably, because it's not easy. It takes time.
Right.
People had to figure
Why
out
did
what
they
to
lose
do.
the coal jobs?
When you
Why-
have things
Why
like,
did they lose the coal jobs? I'm just wondering which coal jobs. What do you when the miners lost the coal
Andrew
jobs?
Yang has it. Look
Which
on
one?
it, and it talks about Andrew, look on Andrew Yang's site.
Okay.
It talked about coal mines closing just because
Yeah. Coal jobs aren't coming back.
efficient
Right.
anymore.
Well,
And how hard
I'm
it was
asking
to
when. I'm asking when because if it was
You have to
because
look
of
on
regulations
You have to
shutting
look
down
on the
coal
site.
mines,
I don't know exactly
that's
what
too
it is.
fast. That's
It was-
not the free market.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I'll throw that. I'll cite that.
Wait. It was.
That's off the Andrew Yang
Yeah, no,
site.
that-
I think
All
it's
right.
on
With
the
the shift
bottom.
in technology,
Yeah, I'll check it out.
we're not coal the way we used to because we're using different energies now, and so coal is one of those resources that's kind of going to become legacy more and more. And so politically, they've been playing with that, saying those jobs are coming back, but those jobs aren't coming back. Like,
Yeah, and we do mountaintop mining now. We knocked the whole mountain off. We need a lot less people to get that coal. We
Right.
used to dig into the mountain and get coal. Now we said, fuck it, and knock the top right off.
And,
Well,
and we
but-
got fracking now, natural gas,
Yeah,
and
right.
we use
Imagine
oil
things
better than
like-
ever. We never
Right.
reached peak oil. In fact, we figured
Right.
out ways to use oil so that we may never run out of oil again. Huh.
but you,
But was it the government that stopped the coal mines, or was it the free market?
Free market.
yeah,
Stop
it
the coal mines, not regulations by the EPA. Okay.
Well-
It must have been old. I'm just saying it must
Well,
have been
but-
old. I'll check
well,
the
but
date
keep-
on that to see
but-
if
but-
maybe it was
It's not efficient anymore.
government
It's a lot of money
policy.
to pull that out compared to fracking. Fracking is one of the things that destroyed it.
right.
Yeah.
But keep,
No, absolutely.
other technologies are cheaper as well. So the private sector eventually we're also pushing for it. That's why I'm gonna call it bipartisan when government private sector,
But not for electricity. For electricity, coal is king right now. We haven't really changed that.
Right.
So we still use coal in major amounts. So if the government came out and said,
No.
coal is already going out, we're going to speed that up and push it off the edge, then that is not free market. If the government
Right.
had a hand in changing it, then it's not.
That happened.
Yeah.
Coal just got crushed by the market. That's what happened.
well, guys, we're getting sidetracked on that.
Nothing to do with regulation.
Isn't the point really though that
All right,
Every now
I'll
and
check it
then-
out.
for different reasons, whether it's government or private sector, you're going to have a change in an industry that's going to make certain jobs obsolete. You know, we've seen it in automotive.
It'll always happen. Yeah.
manufacturing.
Sure.
I think now it's more rapid though.
And we
now,
don't have.
remember, Blockbuster disappeared in a fucking weekend. Remember all that shit?
We just.
How many people were employed in that? And then the next weekend, you're like, Netflix. I love shows. Like, it was nostalgic to go pick. Eat the dick, I'm out of here.
Guys. But we
got crushed when video games got really flipping good. I wasn't gonna go play pinball. Eat a dick. I now play it 40 years later at a retro spot.
Have you guys ever seen that video on YouTube? It's old now. It's called Shift Happens. And it was I think like a high school class that did it as a project where they put together this slideshow kind of, if you will, on data of big changes that were taking place and that had already taken place that it kind of went viral for a while. I thought it was cool as hell the first one I saw. There's a bunch of them out there now. They've tried to do iterations since then. But you should check it out because they were talking about just the shift in how many, they said the greatest population, for example, of English speakers in the world are actually in China. More people speak English in China than, just because they're 5 times the size of us, for example, and they all learn English. They were showing how many babies were going to be born in India, and they showed the progression of data bits, the last 10 years till now, and the proliferation of computers, and just this huge shift in the emerging world and economies taking place, and technology as well. And so they use all these data and facts that just show you. They said, what was it, like 80% of the jobs that kids that are born this year will have by the time they graduate don't exist right now. And just how rapidly technology moves and how things are happening. But look, to your point, Keith, we always find a way, right? Like society makes it.
Did you see me laughing? Yeah, it creates jobs, just like I said.
but to Paul's point, sometimes it's bumpy as hell, and we don't always get it right, and people get hurt in those processes. To your point, I never rely on government to see these coming and allocate the money to provide the training that we should be doing right now for truck drivers, for example. Nobody's going to do that. We're not going to. Those guys are on the road, But it sucks because we're going to give how much money to Boeing this year? We could piss money and make sure those guys are taken care of. And that'd be good for the economy. We'd get ROI on that. But
it wouldn't. Inflation is not good for the economy, no matter who gets it first, no matter who gets a benefit right off the bat. It overall destroys the economy. There is just no way around it. It's not pissing money. It's not just making up money. It has a value, and the more of it you make, the less value each one has. It's just like any other thing. If I have 10 apples, they're worth more than if I have 10,000 apples. We've got to find, then here's my thing. However UBI gets administered then, whether it's by small groups or whatever to phase it in, or I don't know. But whatever Canada does with their healthcare, whatever, Europe does with their education, the people that are finding ways to take care of these problems for their population. When these guys got hit with pandemic, did you see the stimuluses they were giving their population? Freaking insane. Yeah. I forget, they got like 6 months pay in Germany and Denmark. It's kind of different though. I mean, isn't that different though if the government comes in and shuts everything down? They did freeze stuff. Denmark did put they won't let you in your building. They won't let you produce anything. I mean, what choice do they have but to hand everybody a bunch of money? They're the ones who shut it down. But we could afford it. We cannot afford it. I know everybody says we can afford it. Those big companies.
Economic back and forth here. Cool. You two argue it out.
Yeah, no, I hear you. You're right.
I'm over the libertarian concept of which is cool.
Hey, why don't we just wrap it up then?
Okay, cool.
But that's good talk. Sure, guys. I feel like covered a hell of a lot of ground. Paul, thank you for trying to moderate the two of us.
It's good luck. I'm passionate about, so I totally understand that I'm the one bringing up point after point. It's something I'm passionate about. I'm sure if it was something Keith or you were passionate about, and we'll have these talks where you're passionate about it.
Passionate about it. I do believe. Yeah, okay, Mr. Passionate, because that. Okay. I'm gonna keep that one inside. Sorry.
Anything else you want to laugh about?
Too funny.
Yeah, there is. There is.
Another one
But
in the
I'll
back.
do it myself. But I'll do it all by myself. Okay. Thanks, guys.
You.
Heated, fun,
Thanks for including me.
semi-fun.
Fun. Yeah. Oh, great.
All right, good.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Jabari, for coming and joining this. Thanks again, Paul. We're going to wrap this up. Hopefully, I'll have this out soon. Give me about 48 hours, and I'll have it out there.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks, everybody, for
All right, gentlemen.
watching, if there was anyone eventually that watches this. If not, this was just for us, I guess, then. Thanks.
Thanks,
Have a
guys.
good night.
All right, you too.
Thanks,
Later.
Jabari. Thanks, Keith.
Please.